In the shadowed heart of London, a cryptic letter slips under Hercule Poirot's door, its wax seal stamped with a quill elegant, old-fashioned, and chillingly urgent. It whispers of a lost Agatha Christie manuscript, hidden for decades, that holds the key to a murder the world forgot. Why now? Who dares to challenge the great detective with this enigma? As Poirot steps into a web of stolen pages, veiled strangers, and long-buried secrets, each clue unravels a mystery that could rewrite history itself. From a rural library's shattered case to the flickering lights of Blackthorn Manor, the trail twists through coded messages, a golden locket, and a family's dark legacy. Will Poirot's little gray cells outwit a cunning adversary, or has Agatha Christie's final puzzle outsmarted even him? Dive into a tale of suspense, where every chapter unveils a new question, and the truth lies just beyond the next page. Chapter 1. The vanishing manuscript. Rain fell in a steady, mournful drizzle over London, cloaking the city in a gray veil that seemed to hush even the usual clamor of its streets. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in his tailored overcoat and polished shoes, stepped carefully along the wet pavement of Whitehaven Mansions, his mustache impeccably waxed despite the damp. His small, precise steps echoed a rhythm of purpose, though his mind was already turning over a puzzle that had arrived with the morning's post. A letter, penned in elegant script and sealed with a wax stamp bearing the faint impression of a quill, lay folded in his pocket. Its contents were as intriguing as they were enigmatic, a claim that an unpublished manuscript by the great Agatha Christie, hidden for decades, held a clue to an unsolved murder, a clue so potent it could rewrite the case. Poirot's flat, a haven of order and symmetry, welcomed him with the faint aroma of tisane brewing on the stove. His valet, George, had already laid out the morning's correspondence on the polished mahogany desk, but it was the quill-sealed letter that held Poirot's attention. He settled into his armchair, the fire crackling softly in the grate, and unfolded the letter once more. The paper was thick, cream-colored, and bore no return address. The words, written in black ink with a flourish, read, "Monsieur Poirot, your reputation precedes you. In the archives of the Willoughby Library in Kent lies a manuscript, penned by Agatha Christie herself, never published. It holds a clue to a murder long buried, one the world believes unsolved. Seek it before it is lost forever. Time is short." A friend, Poirot's little gray cells, as he so fondly called them, stirred at once. A manuscript by Agatha Christie, the queen of mystery, whose works he admired for their precision and cunning. And a murder case, unsolved, tied to it. The challenge was irresistible. He noted the absence of specifics, no name of the victim, no date of the crime, only the mention of the Willoughby Library, a small institution he vaguely recalled from a case years ago. The signature, "A friend," was a touch theatrical, but Poirot sensed no malice in it, only urgency. He rose, adjusting his tie with a flick of his fingers, and summoned George. "Mon ami," he said, his Belgian accent crisp, "I shall require the train timetable for Kent. The Willoughby Library, I believe, is in the village of Ashford. We depart this afternoon." George, ever unflappable, nodded. "Very good, sir. Shall I pack for an extended stay?" Poirot considered this, his green eyes narrowing. 2 days, perhaps 3. "And my notebook," George the leather-bound one. "This affair, it has the scent of complexity." By noon, Poirot was aboard a train, rattling through the English countryside, the fields blurred by rain-streaked windows. He disliked travel, particularly when it disrupted his routine, but the promise of a Christie manuscript was a siren call. As the train swayed, he reviewed the letter again, noting the wax seal's quill emblem. It was an unusual choice in an age of fountain pens and typewriters. A flourish of the past, he murmured, or perhaps a clue in itself. Ashford greeted him with a damp chill, the village's cobbled streets glistening under gaslights as evening fell. The Willoughby Library, A modest Georgian building, with ivy clinging to its stone facade, stood at the edge of the village square. Its windows glowed faintly, and Poirot, umbrella in hand, approached with the air of a man who knew precisely where he was going, even if he did not yet know why. Inside, the air was thick with the musty scent of old books. A young woman, her brown hair pinned haphazardly, stood behind a counter cluttered with ledgers. She looked up, startled, as Poirot removed his hat and bowed slightly. "Good evening, mademoiselle. I am Hercule Poirot, and I seek information about a manuscript, a very particular manuscript." The woman, who introduced herself as Miss Eleanor Finch, librarian and sole keeper of Willoughby's archives, blinked nervously. "A manuscript? We have many, Mr. Poirot, but nothing so special as to attract a detective." Her voice trembled slightly, and Poirot's keen eyes noted her fidgeting hands. "It is one by Agatha Christie," he said, watching her closely. "Unpublished, I am told, and of great significance." Miss Finch's face paled, and she gripped the counter's edge. "That manuscript, it was here, in the restricted section. But, oh, heavens, it was stolen last night." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his mind accelerating. "Stolen? Tell me, mademoiselle, everything. Leave no detail unspoken." Miss Finch, wringing her hands, recounted the events. The library had closed at 6 the previous evening, and she had locked the doors herself. The manuscript, kept in a locked glass case in the archive room, was a curiosity, a handwritten draft of an untitled Christie story, donated decades ago by a local family. No one had requested it in years, but when she opened the library that morning, the case was shattered, the manuscript gone. "I didn't call the police," she admitted. "It's just a book, after all, and I thought perhaps it was a prank." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A prank does not break glass, mademoiselle. Show me this case." She led him to a dimly lit room at the back, where shelves sagged under the weight of leather-bound volumes. The glass case, now empty, stood in a corner, its front panel cracked into a spiderweb of fractures. Poirot knelt, his magnifying glass in hand, examining the scene with the precision of a surgeon. The lock was intact, suggesting the thief had smashed the glass rather than picked it. Amateurish, perhaps, but bold. Then, on the oak table beside the case, he spotted it, a smudge of black ink, still faintly wet, its edges curling into a pattern that matched the quill-sealed letter in his pocket. "Tiens," he murmured, his mind racing. The ink was no coincidence. The thief, in their haste, had left a trace of their identity, or at least their tools. He turned to Miss Finch, who hovered anxiously. "This ink, mademoiselle, do you recognize it? It is not common." She shook her head. "No, we use blue ink for our records. That looks old-fashioned, like something from a calligrapher." Poirot nodded, his thoughts aligning like pieces of a puzzle. The letter, the theft, the ink, they were threads of the same tapestry. "Tell me," he said, "who had access to this room yesterday?" "Only me," Miss Finch replied, "and Mr. Harrow, the caretaker, but he's been with the library for 30 years. He wouldn't steal." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "In my experience, mademoiselle, it is not the years that make a man trustworthy, but his actions. Where may I find this Mr. Harrow?" Miss Finch hesitated, then gave directions to a cottage at the village's edge. Poirot thanked her, noting her unease, and stepped back into the rain. The night was young, and the trail was fresh. As he walked, he considered the manuscript's significance. Why steal it now, after decades of obscurity? And what clue could it hold to murder long forgotten? The letter sender, a friend, knew more than they had revealed, and Poirot suspected they were closer than he yet realized. Mr. Harrow's cottage was a squat, ivy-covered dwelling, its windows dark. Poirot knocked, but no answer came. He circled the property, his shoes sinking into the muddy garden, and noticed a faint glow from a shed at the back. Peering through a cracked window, he saw a man gray-haired, stooped, hunched over a desk, scribbling furiously. A bottle of black ink, its label identical to the one in Poirot's memory, sat open beside him. Poirot knocked sharply on the shed door. The man, presumably Harrow, started, spilling ink across his papers. "Who's there?" he called, his voice sharp with fear. "Hercule Poirot," came the calm reply. "I wish to speak of the manuscript stolen from the Willoughby Library." Harrow opened the door, his face a mask of surprise and guilt. "I don't know anything about that," he stammered, but Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "Then perhaps, monsieur, you will explain the ink on your desk, which matches that found at the scene of the theft and the letter that brought me here." Harrow's shoulders sagged. "I didn't steal it," he said at last. "I only borrowed it to read. It's a treasure, you see, and I've guarded it for years, but someone else took it last night. I saw her, a woman, veiled, slipping out the back door as I locked up." Poirot's mind seized on this. A veiled woman, a stolen manuscript, and an ink stain tying it all to his mysterious correspondent. "You will tell me everything, monsieur," he said, stepping into the shed, "and we shall see if your story holds the truth." Harrow's tale was simple but revealing. He had long coveted the manuscript, reading it in secret when Miss Finch was absent. Last night, he had lingered late, copying passages, when he heard glass shatter. Frightened, he hid, watching as the veiled woman took the manuscript and fled. He recognized her perfume, a rare lavender scent, but not her face. The ink, he admitted, was his, used for his own notes, but he swore he had not written Poirot's letter. Poirot listened, his mind cataloguing details. The lavender perfume was a new thread, delicate but significant. He thanked Harrow, warning him to speak to no one, and returned to the inn where he had taken a room. There, by the light of a single lamp, he re-examined the letter. The quill seal, the ink, the veiled woman all pointed to a deliberate trail, laid for him to follow. The manuscript was no mere relic. It was a key, and someone wanted Poirot to turn it. Chapter 2. The quill's secret. Hercule Poirot stepped out of his London flat into the crisp morning air, the faint hum of the city stirring around him. The cryptic letter, with its inked quill signature and hint of a lost Agatha Christie manuscript, weighed heavily on his mind. The ink stain he had observed in the rural library matching the letter's distinct hue suggested a connection too precise to be mere chance. His little gray cells, ever restless, demanded he pursue the trail. The letter's words echoed. Asterisk, seek the quill's secret in the heart of England's pages. Asterisk to Poirot. This pointed to a source, a place where such rare ink might be procured. With his polished cane in hand and his Homburg hat tilted just so, he set off for London's West End, where the city's finest stationery shops resided. The West End was alive with the clatter of horse-drawn carriages and the occasional sputter of a motor car, their sounds mingling with the chatter of pedestrians. Poirot navigated the bustling streets with his characteristic precision, his sharp eyes scanning shop fronts until he reached asterisk quill and ink asterisk, a quaint establishment tucked between a tailor's and a tea shop. Its window displayed an array of fountain pens, ink wells, and creamy sheets of paper, each arranged with an almost obsessive care that Poirot admired. A small brass bell jingled as he entered, and the air filled with the subtle scent of leather and ink. Behind the counter stood Mr. Percival Quill, a wiry man with ink-stained fingers and a nervous smile. His spectacles glinted under the shop's gaslight as he looked up. "Good morning, sir. How may I assist you? A fine pen, perhaps, or a bespoke journal?" Poirot inclined his head, his mustache twitching slightly. "Monsieur Quill, it is not a purchase that brings me here, but a question. I am Hercule Poirot, and I seek information about a most particular ink, a deep indigo, rare, used in a letter I received. I believe it may have been purchased from your establishment." Mr. Quill's smile faltered, his hands fidgeting with a stack of blotting paper. "Indigo, you say? We carry many inks, sir, but—" "Well, I'd need more specifics. Do you have the letter?" Poirot produced the letter with a flourish, laying it carefully on the counter. The inked quill signature gleamed under the light, its hue unmistakable. Mr. Quill leaned closer, his brow furrowing. Yes, this is our Indigo Royale, a specialty blend from a small supplier in Florence. Very few purchase it too costly for most, but I do recall selling a bottle recently. To whom, monsieur? Poirot's voice was gentle but firm, his green eyes fixed on Quill's face. The shopkeeper hesitated, glancing toward the shop's door as if expecting an interruption. A woman, sir. She came in perhaps a week ago. Paid in cash, which is unusual for such an expensive item. She wore a hat with a veil, couldn't see her face clearly. Said she needed the ink for a special project. I didn't ask more. She seemed in a hurry. Poirot's mind seized on the detail. A veiled woman, cloaked in mystery, purchasing rare ink that matched both his letter and the library stain. It was no coincidence. Did she leave any other clue? Perhaps name, an address, or something she dropped. Mr. Quill shook his head, but then paused, his eyes darting to a small wastebin beside the counter. Wait, there was something. I swept the floor after she left and found a bit of paper. Thought nothing of it at the time. He rummaged through the bin, retrieving a crumpled train ticket stub. Here it is. A return ticket to St. Mary's Hollow, dated the day she came. Poirot took the stub, his gloved fingers handling it as if it were a rare artifact. The ticket was for a rural village in Essex, a place he knew little of, but which now loomed large in his investigation. Merci, Monsieur Quill, you have been most helpful. One final question: did this woman say anything else? Perhaps about a manuscript or a library? Quill's face paled slightly. No, sir, nothing like that, but she did ask if we stocked quills, the old-fashioned kind. I told her we had a few, mostly decorative. She bought one, a black feather with a silver nib, said it was for authenticity. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The quill, the ink, the ticket-all pointed to a deliberate trail, one laid out for him to follow. He thanked Quill and stepped back into the street, the ticket stub tucked safely in his pocket. St. Mary's Hollow was his next destination, a village that held secrets he was determined to uncover. But first, he needed to confirm the ink's significance. He made his way to a small chemist's shop nearby, known for its expertise in analyzing obscure substances. The chemist, a portly man named Mr. Hargreaves, greeted Poirot with a nod. What's this, then? A detective needing my skills. Precisement, Poirot replied, presenting a sample of the ink from the letter, carefully scraped onto a glass slide. I need to know everything about this ink, its composition, its origin, and whether it matches another sample I found. He described the stain from the library, noting its location and texture. Hargreaves examined the slide under a microscope, muttering to himself as he worked. After a few minutes, he looked up. This is a rare one, Mr. Poirot, Indigo Royale, made with a unique blend of pigments from Italy. The sample you described from the library, same composition, I'd wager. It's not something you'd find in every stationer's shop. Whoever used this ink wanted it to stand out. Poirot's suspicions were confirmed. The ink tied the letter to the library theft, and the veiled woman was the linchpin. But why St. Mary's Hollow? What connection did it have to Agatha Christie's manuscript? He thanked Hargreaves and caught a cab to Liverpool Street Station, where he purchased a ticket for the next train to Essex. The train journey was a quiet affair, the countryside unfolding in patches of green fields and hedgerows. Poirot sat by the window, his notebook open, jotting down details: the veiled woman, the ink, the quill, the ticket stub. Each was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained incomplete. He recalled the letter's mention of England's pages and wondered if it referred to more than just the manuscript. Could there be another document, perhaps hidden in St. Mary's Hollow, waiting to be found? As the train pulled into the small station at St. Mary's Hollow, Poirot stepped onto the platform, the air cool and damp with the promise of rain. The village was a cluster of stone cottages and winding lanes, its heart dominated by a church with a weathered spire. he made his way to the village inn, the Rose and Crown *, where he booked a room under the guise of a historian researching local estates. The innkeeper, a stout woman named Mrs. Baxter, welcomed him with a warm smile. "St. Mary's Hollow's a quiet place, sir," she said as she handed him a key. "Not much happens here, save for the old stories about Blackthorn Manor. Haunted, some say, though I don't hold with such nonsense." Poirot's interest piqued. "Blackthorn Manor, you say? Tell me, madame, what are these stories?" Mrs. Baxter leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Oh, it's an old tale. Back in the 1890s, a young heiress, Margaret Hale, was found dead there. Murder, they said, but no one was ever caught. The manor's been half abandoned since, owned by the Blackthorn family, though they rarely visit. Folks say they see lights in the windows at night, and some swear they've seen a woman in a veiled hat wandering the grounds." Poirot's mustache twitched. "The veiled woman again. Most interesting, madame. And this Margaret Hale, her case, it was never solved." "Not a bit," Mrs. Baxter replied, shaking her head. "The Blackthorns had money and influence. Word is, they hushed it up, but the village never forgot. There's a plaque for Margaret in the churchyard, if you're curious." Poirot thanked her and retired to his room, a cozy space with a view of the village green. He sat at the small desk, spreading out his notes and the train ticket stub. The veiled woman had been here, perhaps to steal the manuscript, perhaps to leave another clue. The mention of Blackthorn Manor and Margaret Hawley's murder suggested the manuscript's secret was tied to that long-ago crime. But how had Agatha Christie known of it, and why hide the truth in an unpublished work? The next morning, Poirot visited the village church, where a small plaque in the churchyard marked Margaret Hawley's grave. The inscription was simple: Margaret Hale, 1870 to 1893. Taken too soon, beside it. Someone had left a single rose, its petals wilting in the morning dew. Poirot knelt, examining the flower. It was fresh, placed within the last day. A coincidence? He thought not. His next stop was the village post office, where he inquired about recent visitors. The postmistress, a sharp-eyed woman named Miss Tate, recalled a woman in a veiled hat sending a letter about a week ago. "Didn't give a name," Miss Tate said, "but she posted it to London. Paid extra for express delivery." Poirot's heart quickened. The timing matched the arrival of his letter. "Did you see the address, mademoiselle?" Miss Tate nodded. It was to a flat in Whitehaven Mansions. "Didn't catch the name, but I remember the street. Whitehaven Mansions, his own address." The veiled woman had sent the letter directly to him, knowing he would take up the challenge. But why him, and what was her connection to the manuscript? Determined to learn more, Poirot made his way to Blackthorn Manor, a sprawling estate on the edge of the village. Its iron gates were rusted, the drive overgrown with weeds. He knocked at the caretaker's cottage, where an elderly man named Mr. Grayson greeted him warily. "What do you want with the manor?" Grayson asked, his eyes narrowing. "I am a historian, monsieur." Poirot lied smoothly, researching the history of great houses in Essex. "I understand Blackthorn Manor has a colorful past," Grayson grunted. Colorful's one way to put it. The place hasn't been lived in proper for years, not since the Hale girl's death. I keep it tidy, but it's a lonely job. Seen some odd things, though, lights in the windows, footsteps in the dust, and last week, I swear I saw a woman in a veiled hat near the library wing. Thought I was seeing ghosts." Poirot's pulse quickened. "The library wing, you say? Might I see it?" Grayson hesitated but relented, leading Poirot through the manor's creaking halls. The library was a cavernous room, its shelves heavy with dusty tomes. Poirot's eye scanned the space, noting a faint scuff mark on the floor near a bookcase. Kneeling, he examined it closely. A trace of indigo ink, barely visible, smudged into the wood. His fingers brushed the bookcase, and with a soft click, a panel swung open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a single sheet of paper, part of a manuscript, its edges brittle but the writing clear. It was in Agatha Christie's hand, a fragment of a story describing a murder in a secret passage, with a clue hidden in a golden locket. The page ended abruptly, but the implications were clear. Christie had known about Margaret Hawley's murder and had woven its truth into her work. Poirot tucked the page into his pocket, his mind ablaze. The veiled woman had been here, perhaps to retrieve or plant this page. The ink, the quill, the manuscript, they were all part of a deliberate trail, leading him to Blackthorn Manor and the secret of Margaret Hale. As he left the manor, the sky darkened with gathering clouds, mirroring the mystery that deepened with each step. Back at the inn, Poirot sat by the fire, the manuscript page spread before him. The veiled woman was no ghost, she was real, and she was guiding him. But to what end? Was she a descendant of Margaret, seeking justice? Or someone else, with motives less pure? The golden locket mentioned in the manuscript was his next clue, a tangible link to the past. Tomorrow, he would visit the village historian, hoping to learn more about Margaret Hale and her lost locket. As the fire crackled, Poirot sipped his tisane, the warmth soothing his racing thoughts. The quill's secret was unraveling, but the path ahead was fraught with shadows. St. Mary's Hollow held more than ghosts, it held answers, and Hercule Poirot would find them, one meticulous step at a time. Chapter 3. Shadows in St. Mary's Hollow. Train to St. Mary's Hollow rattled through the English countryside, its rhythmic clatter a soothing counterpoint to the frenetic workings of Hercule Poirot's mind. The little Belgian detective sat by the window, his gloved hands folded neatly over his polished cane, his mustache impeccably trimmed despite the early hour. Outside, the rolling hills blurred into a patchwork of green and gold, dappled with the first mists of autumn. The torn train ticket stub, tucked safely in his waistcoat pocket, was a tangible thread in the tapestry of mystery he was beginning to weave. St. Mary's Hollow, a village he had never visited, held secrets he was determined to unravel. As the train slowed, Poirot adjusted his Homburg hat and stepped onto the platform, where the air carried the damp scent of moss and wood smoke. The station was modest, a single platform bordered by a low stone wall, with a sign proclaiming St. Mary's Hollow in faded paint. A porter, an elderly man with a weathered face, tipped his cap as Poirot approached. "Welcome, sir," the porter said, eyeing Poirot's pristine attire with mild curiosity. "Not many visitors this time o' year. You here for the fishing?" Poirot's lips curved into a polite smile. "Non, monsieur. I am here for, let us say, a study of history. The village, it has much to offer in this regard. Oui." The porter shrugged, clearly unaccustomed to such inquiries. "History, eh? Well, there's the old church, and Blackthorn Manor up the hill. Folks say it's haunted, but I don't hold with that nonsense. Where you staying, sir?" "The Rose and Crown Inn," Poirot replied, recalling the name from his inquiries at the station in London. "Eh, good choice. It's just down the lane. Mind the cobbles, they're uneven this time o' year." Poirot thanked the porter and made his way toward the village, his small suitcase in hand. The Rose and Crown Inn was a charming establishment, its ivy-clad facade glowing warmly in the late afternoon sun. The innkeeper, a stout woman named Mrs. Agnes Thatcher, greeted him with a bustling efficiency that belied her warm smile. "Mr. Poirot, is it?" she said, checking a ledger behind the counter. "We've got your room ready. Top floor. Best view of the village green. Supper's at 7, if you're peckish." "Merci, Madame Thatcher," Poirot said, inclining his head. "I am most grateful for your hospitality. Tell me, what can you say of Blackthorn Manor?" "I have heard it mentioned." Double quotes Mrs. Thatcher's smile faltered, her hands pausing over the ledger. "Blackthorn Manor. Oh, it's a grand old place, but it's seen better days. The Blackthorn family still owns it, though young Edward Blackthorn's the only one left now. Lives there alone, save for the caretaker, old Mr. Gibbs. Folks say it's a gloomy spot, What with the stories? Stories. Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. Oh, just village talk, she said quickly, waving a hand. About the murder, you know. Years ago, a young lass named Margaret Hale was found dead in the woods near the manor. Never caught the killer. Some say her ghost walks the grounds, but I don't believe in such things. Poirot nodded thoughtfully, his mind cataloguing the name. Margaret Hale, most intriguing, madame. And this Edward Blackthorne, he is often in the village. Not often, she admitted. Keeps to himself, mostly. You'll see him at the pub now and then, but he's not one for chatter. With a final nod, Poirot ascended the creaking staircase to his room, a cozy space with a sloping ceiling and a window overlooking the village green. He unpacked methodically, arranging his toiletries with precision on the dresser. The mention of Margaret Hawley's murder had struck a chord, resonating with the cryptic letter's hint of an unsolved crime tied to Agatha Christie's lost manuscript. Could this be the case the letter referenced? His little gray cells hummed with anticipation. That evening, Poirot donned his overcoat and ventured to the village pub, the Hare and Hound, a low-beamed establishment filled with the murmur of locals and the scent of ale. He chose a corner table, ordering a glass of red wine passable, if not exceptional, and observed the room with the keen eye of a hawk. The patrons were a mix of farmers, shopkeepers, and a few younger faces, their conversations a tapestry of village life, crop yields, the upcoming harvest festival, and, occasionally, whispers of Blackthorne Manor. A grizzled man at the bar, nursing a pint, caught Poirot's attention. His withered face and calloused hands suggested a life of labor, but his eyes darted nervously when the name Blackthorne was mentioned. Poirot sipped his wine, waiting for an opportune moment. When the man stepped outside for a smoke, Poirot followed, his cane tapping lightly on the cobblestones. "Bonsoir, monsieur," Poirot said, his voice smooth as velvet. "I am Hercule Poirot, a visitor to your charming village. I could not help but overhear talk of Blackthorne Manor. It is a place of great interest. Nong." The man, who introduced himself as Tom Wheeler, a local farmer, squinted at Poirot. "You're that detective fellow, ain't you? Heard you was coming. What's a man like you want with Blackthorne Manor?" Poirot's smile was disarming. "Merely a curiosity, monsieur. I am a student of history, and old estates, they have many stories to tell. You, perhaps, know some of these stories?" Tom hesitated, exhaling a plume of smoke. I know some. Everyone does. Margaret Hawley's murder, for one, happened when I was a lad. She was a beauty, that one, set to inherit a fortune. Found her in the woods, strangled, they say. Folks thought it was a lover's quarrel, but nothing was ever proved. The Blackthornes hushed it up quick, had the money to do it. See, and the manor itself, Poirot pressed gently, it is said to be unusual. Tom snorted. Unusual's one way to put it. Lights flickering at night, noises in the woods. Gibbs, the caretaker, says it's just the wind, but I've seen things myself. Shadows moving where they shouldn't, and there was a woman skulking about last week, all in black, wearing a veil. Not from round here, that's for sure." Poirot's pulse quickened, though his expression remained serene. "A veiled woman, matching the description from Mr. Quill's shop. This woman, you saw her clearly?" "Not clear. No," Tom admitted. "It was dusk, and she was near the manor gates. Moved quick, like she didn't want to be seen. Didn't think much of it till now." Poirot thanked Tom and returned to the pub, his mind racing. The veiled woman was a thread connecting London to St. Mary's Hollow, and Blackthorne Manor was the nexus of this mystery. The next morning, he resolved to visit the manor. Armed with a plausible pretext, he would pose as a historian researching country estates, a role that would allow him to probe without arousing suspicion. The walk to Blackthorne Manor was brisk, the air heavy with the scent of impending rain. The estate loomed at the edge of the village, its Gothic spires piercing the mist like the bones of some ancient beast. The iron gates were rusted but imposing, Flanked by stone lions withered by time, Poirot rang the bell, and at the moment, a stooped figure emerged from a side path. Mr. Gibbs, the caretaker, his face etched with suspicion. What do you want? Gibbs asked, his voice gruff. Bonjour, Monsieur Gibbs, Poirot said, his tone warm but authoritative. I am Hercule Poirot, a historian of some repute. I am writing a treatise on English estates, and Blackthorn Manor. It is said to be a jewel of architectural history. May I speak with the master of the house? Gibbs's eyes narrowed. Mr. Edwards not one for visitors. But I suppose I can show you the grounds, if you're quick about it. Poirot followed Gibbs through the gates, noting the overgrown gardens and the manor's crumbling facade. The air was thick with neglect, the windows dark and uninviting. Gibbs led him to the library, a cavernous room lined with dusty tomes and heavy oak furniture. As Gibbs rambled about the manor's history, Poirot's eyes scanned the room, settling on a peculiar panel in the wall, slightly ajar. Pardon, monsieur, Poirot interrupted, gesturing to the panel. It is part of the original design. Gibbs frowned, moving to close the panel. Just a storage nook. Nothing special, but Poirot was too quick. With a deft movement, he stepped forward, his cane nudging the panel open. Inside was a small compartment, barely large enough for a book, and there, nestled in the dust, was a single page, its edges yellowed, but its handwriting unmistakable. Agatha Christie's own. Monsieur Gibbs, Poirot said, his voice low but firm. This page, it is most curious. How came it to be here? Gibbs paled, stammering, I don't know, sir, never seen it before, must have been left by someone. Poirot carefully extracted the page, his gloved fingers handling it as if it were a relic. The text was fragmented, a passage from a story never published, but one line stood out. The truth lies hidden where the shadows dance. It was cryptic, yet it resonated with the village's whispers of flickering lights and moving shadows. The page was a clue, a piece of the puzzle that tied the manor to Margaret Hawley's murder and the vanished manuscript. As Gibbs shuffled nervously, Poirot slipped the page into his pocket, his mind alight with possibilities. The veiled woman, the ink, the ticket, and now this page, all threads in a tapestry he was beginning to understand. The manor held secrets, and Edward Blackthorn, its reclusive air, was at the heart of them. I thank you, Monsieur Gibbs, Poirot said, his tone polite but final. You have been most helpful. I shall return, perhaps, to discuss further with Monsieur Blackthorn. Gibbs muttered something unintelligible as Poirot departed, the mist swirling around him like a cloak. Back at the Rose and Crown, Poirot sat by the fire, the manuscript page spread before him. The words danced in his mind, a coded message from Christie herself, pointing to a truth buried in the shadows of St. Mary's Hollow. The discovery of the page was a breakthrough, a tangible link to the mystery, yet it raised new questions. Who had hidden it, and why? As the fire crackled, Poirot sipped his tisane, his little gray cells working tirelessly. The veiled woman was the key, and Blackthorn Manor was the stage. Tomorrow, he would delve deeper, seeking the truth where the shadows danced. The next morning, Poirot rose early, his resolve as sharp as his mustache. He decided to visit the village church, where records of Margaret Hawley's death might offer further insight. The church, a Norman structure with a squat tower, stood at the heart of St. Mary's Hollow, its graveyard a silent testament to centuries of village life. The vicar, a kindly man named Reverend Hawthorne, greeted Poirot with a warm handshake. You're the historian, Mr. Poirot, the vicar asked, adjusting his spectacles. Mrs. Thatcher mentioned you. What brings you to our humble parish? A matter of history. Reverend, Poirot replied, his eyes scanning the church's interior. I am researching the unfortunate case of Mademoiselle Margaret Hale. Her story. It is one of great tragedy. Nong. The vicar's face clouded. A sad tale, indeed. Margaret was a bright young woman, full of promise. Her death shook the village. The records are in the vestry, if you'd like to see them. Poirot followed the vicar to a small room off the nave, where a leather-bound ledger lay open on a table. The pages, yellowed with age, chronicled births, marriages, and deaths. Poirot's finger traced the entries for 1895, stopping at Margaret Hawley's name. Died, October 12, 1895. Cause, strangulation. Verdict, murder by person or persons unknown. Most curious, Poirot murmured. And the locket she wore, it was never found. The vicar shook his head. No, sir, it was a family heirloom, they said. A golden locket with a rose engraving. Vanished the night she died. Some thought the killer took it as a trophy. Poirot's mind flashed to the manuscript page. The truth lies hidden where the shadows dance. Could the locket be the key, hidden somewhere in the manor's shadows? He thanked the vicar and stepped into the graveyard, where Margaret's headstone stood weathered but legible. Kneeling, he noticed a faint scratch on the stone arose, crudely etched, as if added later. It was a clue, subtle but deliberate, linking the locket to the manor. Returning to the village, Poirot stopped at the post office, hoping to learn more about the veiled woman. The postmistress, a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Dodd, was eager to talk. Seen someone like that? Yes, she said, sorting letters. Last week, a woman in a black veil posted a letter. Didn't catch her name, but she was in a hurry. Paid extra for express delivery to London. To London, Poirot's interest piqued. You recall the address, perhaps? Mrs. Dodd frowned, thinking. It was to a bookshop. I think. Something like quill and ink. Poirot's heart skipped a beat. The stationery shop in London, where the rare ink was purchased. The veiled woman was circling back to the city, her movements a dance of deception. He thanked Mrs. Dodd and returned to the inn, his mind buzzing. The manuscript, the locket, the veiled woman all were connected, and Blackthorn Manor was the fulcrum. That evening, Poirot dined at the inn, his thoughts interrupted by a commotion outside. Stepping onto the village green, he saw a crowd gathered around a bonfire, part of the harvest festival preparations. Among them was a young man, tall and gaunt, with a nervous air. Mrs. Thatcher, passing by with a tray of cider, whispered, "That's Edward Blackthorn. Rarely comes to these things." Poirot approached, his manner genial. "Monsieur Blackthorn, I presume. I am Hercule Poirot, a historian. Your manor, it is a marvel of history. May I call upon you to discuss its legacy?" Edward's eyes flickered, with unease. "I'm not much for visitors, Mr. Poirot. The manor's not what it was. But, perhaps tomorrow." Poirot nodded, sensing Edward's reluctance. As the crowd dispersed, he lingered, watching Edward disappear into the mist toward the manor. The young man was hiding something, and Poirot was determined to uncover it. The next day, Poirot returned to Blackthorn Manor, this time alone. Gibbs was nowhere to be seen, and the gates were unlocked. Slipping inside, Poirot explored the grounds, his eyes catching a faint path leading to the woods. Following it, he found a clearing where the earth was disturbed, as if recently dug. Kneeling, he brushed aside leaves, revealing a small, rusted box. Inside was a fragment of paper, its ink faded but legible. The locket holds the key to the rose's secret. Poirot's heart raced. The locket, the rose, the manuscript all were converging. He tucked the fragment into his pocket and returned to the manor, where he found Gibbs in the library, polishing a candelabrum. "Monsieur Gibbs," Poirot said, his voice sharp, "you did not mention this clearing in the woods, nor the box it contains." "Why?" Gibbs froze, his hands trembling. "I don't know what you mean, sir. Just a caretaker. I am." "Don't go poking in the woods." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And the veiled woman, you saw her, did you not, near the gates, as Monsieur Wheeler described?" Gibbs's face crumpled. I saw her?" "Yes." "Didn't know who she was?" "She was looking at the manor, like she was searching for something. I told her to clear off." Poirot nodded, his mind piecing together the puzzle. The veiled woman was searching for the manuscript, or perhaps the locket, and Gibbs, whether through fear or loyalty, was protecting Edward Blackthorne's secrets. As night fell, Poirot sat in his room, the manuscript page and the box fragment before him. The clues were mounting, each a step toward the truth. The veiled woman was no phantom, she was real, and her trail led back to London. Tomorrow he would pursue her, but tonight St. Mary's Hollow held him in its shadowy embrace, its secrets whispering in the mist. The investigation was far from over, but the discovery of the manuscript page and the box fragment marked a significant milestone. Poirot's little gray cells were alight, and the shadows of Blackthorne Manor were beginning to yield their truths. Chapter 4. The coded page. Hercule Poirot sat at the small, polished table in his room at the Rose and Crown Inn, the flickering light of a single candle casting long shadows across the walls. The village of St. Mary's Hollow lay quiet outside, the mist curling through its narrow lanes like a living thing, muffling the distant hoot of an owl. The single page of Agatha Christie's lost manuscript lay before him, its edges slightly yellowed, the typed words crisp but enigmatic. The text was a fragment, a tantalizing piece of a larger puzzle, and Poirot's little gray cells were already humming with the challenge it presented. The page began mid-sentence, as though torn from a larger work, and in the heart of the Rose, the truth lies hidden, locked away where none may see, save those who know the golden secret. The words were evocative, deliberately vague, yet Poirot sensed they were no mere literary flourish. Agatha Christie, the master of misdirection, had woven a clue into this prose, a coded message pointing to the long unsolved murder of Margaret Hale. The reference to golden secret gnawed at him, its significance just out of reach, like a name forgotten on the tip of the tongue. Poirot adjusted his pince-nez and leaned closer, his fingers tracing the typed lines. The page was not a narrative in the traditional sense. It was a riddle, a labyrinth of words designed to conceal as much as it revealed. Below the opening line, the text shifted into a peculiar list. The rose blooms at midnight, its petals 12. The first is courage, the second is truth, the third is loss, the fourth is greed. The list continued, assigning each petal a quality or emotion, ending with the 12th, justice. Poirot's brow furrowed. 12 petals, 12 qualities. There was a pattern here, a cipher perhaps, but its meaning eluded him. He rose from the table, his movements precise, and paced the small room, his polished shoes tapping softly on the wooden floor. The inn was old, its beams creaking faintly, and the air carried the faint scent of lavender from the sachet the innkeeper, Mrs. Dobbs, had placed on the bedside table. Poirot's mind returned to the manuscript's discovery in Blackthorne Manor's hidden compartment. The caretaker, Mr. Grayson, had been evasive, his eyes darting nervously when Poirot mentioned the veiled woman seen near the estate. The connection to Margaret Hawley's murder was undeniable, but the manuscript's purpose remained shrouded in mystery. Poirot paused by the window, parting the heavy curtains to gaze at the misty village below. The church spire pierced the fog, a silent sentinel over St. Mary's Hollow. Margaret Hale, the young heiress, had died 30 years ago, her body found in the manor's gardens, her death attributed to a robbery gone wrong. Yet the case had never sat right with the locals. Whispers of a cover-up, of powerful figures silencing the truth, had lingered like the mist itself. And now, this manuscript penned by Agatha Christie no less suggested a deeper story. 1. That someone was desperate to keep hidden. Returning to the table, Poirot examined the page again. The phrase "the heart of the rose" stood out, its imagery vivid. Roses were a recurring motif in the village, the inn's name, the carvings on Blackthorne Manor's gates. Even the stained glass window in the church depicted a rose entwined with thorns. Could the golden secret be literal? A physical object, perhaps, tied to the rose imagery. Poirot's mind flashed to the possibility of a locket or a ring, something small and valuable, easily concealed. He made a mental note to inquire about Margaret Hawley's possessions, particularly any jewelry she was known to wear. The candle flickered, casting a brief shadow across the page. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he noticed something he had missed, a faint pencil mark in the margin, a single letter OL. It was small, almost invisible, but deliberate, a clue within a clue. He held the page closer to the candle, careful not to singe it, and saw that the L was written in a different hand from the letter he had received in London. The original letter, signed with an inked quill, had led him to the library. This mark suggested another layer, another player in this intricate game. Poirot set the page down and opened his notebook, its pages filled with neat, precise handwriting. He jotted down the key phrases: Heart of the Rose, Golden Secret, 12 Petals, and L. He also noted the ink stain from the library, which had matched the letter's ink, and the train ticket stub from the stationery shop, which had brought him to St. Mary's Hollow. Each clue was a thread, and Poirot was determined to weave them into a coherent tapestry. The next morning, Poirot rose early, his routine as meticulous as ever. He adjusted his tie, polished his shoes, and descended to the inn's dining room, where Mrs. Dobbs served him a breakfast of poached eggs and toast. The innkeeper was a stout woman with a warm smile, but her eyes held a hint of curiosity as she watched Poirot. "Find anything interesting at the manor, Mr. Poirot?" she asked, pouring him a cup of tea. Poirot smiled, his mustache twitching. "The manor is a place of many secrets, Madame Dobbs, but Hercule Poirot, he is adept at uncovering what is hidden." She chuckled, wiping her hands on her apron. "Well, you be careful. Folks round here don't take kindly to strangers poking into old business. Margaret Hawley's murder. It's like a ghost that won't stay buried." Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. "A ghost, perhaps, but one that leaves clues. Tell me, madame, do you recall if Mademoiselle Hale was known to wear a locket or a piece of jewelry with a rose design?" Mrs. Dobbs paused, her brow creasing. "A locket, you say? Now that you mention it, there was talk of a gold locket she always wore, had a rose engraved on it, or so they said. Never found it after she died, though? Stolen, most likely." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Most interesting. And this locket, it was of value." "Oh, aye. Not just for the gold, but because it was a family heirloom. Hale family kept to themselves, but they were wealthy enough. Some said the locket held a secret, but that's just village gossip." "Gossip, madame, is often the seed of truth," Poirot said, sipping his tea. "I shall visit the village historian today. Perhaps she can shed light on this locket." The village historian, Mrs. Clara Beaumont, lived in a quaint cottage at the edge of St. Mary's Hollow, its garden overflowing with roses of every color. Poirot knocked on the door, his hat in hand, and was greeted by a woman in her 60s, her silver hair pinned neatly, her eyes sharp with intelligence. She invited him in, offering tea and biscuits, which Poirot accepted with his usual courtesy. "Mrs. Beaumont, I am Hercule Poirot, and I am investigating a matter of some delicacy," he began, settling into a chintz-covered armchair. "It concerns the late Margaret Hale and a certain manuscript that may hold clues to her death." Mrs. Beaumont's eyes widened slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Margaret Hale, that was a tragedy. I was just a girl when it happened, but I remember the village was in an uproar. The police said it was a robbery, but no one believed it." Poirot leaned forward. "And why, madame, did no one believe it?" She hesitated, then sighed. "Margaret was different. She was kind, but headstrong. She'd been asking questions about her father's business dealings, things the Hale family didn't want aired. Some said she'd crossed someone powerful, you say. And this locket she wore, with the rose engraving, do you know of it?" Mrs. Beaumont nodded slowly. "Oh, yes, it was her mother's, passed down through the family. Gold, with a rose etched on the front. She never took it off. After she died, they searched for it, but it was gone. The police thought the thief took it, but—" She trailed off, her eyes distant. "But you believe otherwise?" Poirot prompted gently. I always thought it was strange. Margaret was found in the gardens, not far from the manor's secret passage. If it was a robbery, why not take her rings or her pearls? The locket was personal, you see. It meant something. Poirot's mind raced. The secret passage, mentioned in the manuscript page, was becoming a focal point, and the locket, with its rose motif, matched the manuscript's imagery perfectly. He thanked Mrs. Beaumont and made his way to the village jeweler, a small shop tucked between the butcher and the post office. The jeweler, Mr. Thomas Wren, was a wiry man with a magnifying glass tucked into his vest pocket. He listened as Poirot described the locket, his expression growing guarded. A gold locket with a rose engraving. I haven't seen one like that in years, Wren said, polishing a watch, but, well, there was something similar. About a month ago, a woman brought in a locket for repair, gold, with a rose on it. Needed a new clasp. Poirot's heart quickened. This woman, Monsieur Wren, can you describe her? She was odd, wore a dark coat and a scarf over her face, like she didn't want to be seen. Paid in cash and gave her name as AC. Didn't say much else. AC, Poirot repeated, his mind flashing to Agatha Christie. Could it be a coincidence? Or was someone using her initials to obscure their identity? And this locket, did you repair it? Yes, sir. Took a day or two. She picked it up and left. Haven't seen her since. Poirot pressed further, learning that the locket had been in poor condition, its clasp broken and its interior tarnished. Wren had noticed a small engraving inside a single letter. M. It was enough to confirm the locket's connection. To Margaret Hale, Poirot thanked the jeweler and stepped outside, the cool air sharpening his thoughts. The locket was the key, he was certain. Its mention in the manuscript, its disappearance after Margaret's death, and its recent reappearance suggested someone was retracing the steps of the original crime. But who? The veiled woman from the stationery shop, the mysterious AC, was a shadow moving through the case, always one step ahead. And the letter L in the manuscript's margin, could it point to the locket itself, or something more? Poirot returned to the inn, his mind a whirl of possibilities. He spread the manuscript page on the table once more, this time focusing on the list of petals. Each quality, courage, truth, loss, greed, seemed to describe a person or a motive. He began to suspect the 12 petals were not literal, but symbolic, perhaps representing 12 individuals involved in Margaret's life or death. The golden secret could be the locket, but it might also be the truth it concealed, a truth someone was desperate to keep hidden. As night fell, Poirot lit another candle and began decoding the list. He assigned each petal a number, from 1 to 12, and cross-referenced them with the qualities listed. Courage, the first petal, could refer to Margaret herself, who had dared to question her father's dealings. Truth, the second, might point to someone who knew what had happened but stayed silent. Loss, the third, could be the grief of those left behind. Greed, the fourth, suggested a motive for the murder itself. He paused at the 12th petal. Justice. It was a promise, a vow that the truth would be revealed. Poirot felt a surge of admiration for Agatha Christie, who had crafted this puzzle not just to entertain, but to right a wrong. The manuscript was her weapon, its clues a map to justice. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Mrs. Dobbs, holding a tray with a pot of tisane. Thought you might need this, Mr. Poirot. You've been up here for hours. Poirot smiled, accepting the tray. You are most kind, madame. Tell me, have you heard of anyone in the village with the initials AC? Mrs. Dobbs frowned, thinking, can't say I have. There's old Arthur Crane, but he's been dead 10 years. And Alice Cooper, but she's a child. Why do you ask? A small matter, Poirot said, waving a hand. But if you hear of such a person, you will inform Hercule Poirot? Yes. Of course, she said, then hesitated. Mr. Poirot, you don't think this business with the manuscript has anything to do with those strange lights at Blackthorn Manor, do you? Poirot's eyes sharpened. Lights, you say? Folks have seen them flickering in the windows, late at night. Started a few weeks ago, right around when that manuscript went missing. Poirot thanked her and closed the door, his mind racing. The lights at Blackthorn Manor, the veiled woman, the locket, the manuscript, all were pieces of the same puzzle. He returned to the table, his resolve hardening. The locket's owner, AC, was the key to unlocking the next phase of the investigation. And Blackthorn Manor, with its secrets and its hidden passages, was calling him back. The next day, Poirot visited the village church, hoping the rose imagery in the stained glass window might offer insight. The vicar, a kindly man named Mr. Ellis, showed him the window, its vibrant reds and golds glowing in the morning light. The rose was depicted with 12 petals, each etched with a faint symbol across, a heart, a dagger. Poirot's pulse quickened. The symbols matched the qualities listed in the manuscript, though their order was different. Mr. Ellis, this window, it is old. Poirot asked. Centuries old, the vicar replied. The Hale family donated it, back when they owned half the village. They say it tells a story, but no one's ever cracked it. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloging the symbols. The window was another clue, a physical echo of the manuscript's cipher. He spent the afternoon sketching the window, noting the order of the symbols and comparing them to the petal list. By evening, he had a theory. The 12 petals represented 12 people, and the symbols in the window were a key to their identities or roles in Margaret's murder. As he walked back to the inn, the mist thickening around him, Poirot felt a prickle of unease. Someone was watching him, he was sure of it. He quickened his pace, his hand tightening on his walking stick. The village was quiet, too quiet, and the shadows seemed to move with a purpose of their own. Back in his room, Poirot locked the door and sat down to write a letter to his friend, Chief Inspector Japp, outlining the case so far. He described the manuscript, the locket, the veiled woman, and the strange lights at Blackthorn Manor. If anything happened to him, Japp would know where to look. As he sealed the letter, a floorboard creaked outside his door. Poirot froze, his senses alert. He moved silently to the door, his hand on the knob, and opened it swiftly. The hallway was empty, but a faint scent lingered, lavender, mixed with something sharper, like ink. Poirot's lips curved into a grim smile. The game was afoot, and the players were closing in. He returned to the manuscript page, his eyes falling on the letter L in the margin. It was no coincidence, he decided. It was a signature, a taunt, or perhaps a cry for help. Tomorrow, he would return to Blackthorn Manor, to the secret passage where Margaret Hale had last been seen. The locket, the manuscript, and the truth were waiting. The chapter closed with Poirot extinguishing the candle, the room plunging into darkness. He lay in bed, his mind racing, the pieces of the puzzle shifting and realigning. The locket's owner, AC, was out there, and with her, the final key to Margaret Hawley's murder. Poirot's little gray cells would not rest until the truth was revealed, and the shadow of Blackthorn Manor was banished forever. Chapter 5. The locket's trail. Hercule Poirot adjusted his immaculate black hat as he stepped off the train at Victoria Station, the clamor of London's bustling crowds a stark contrast to the quiet mists of St. Mary's Hollow. His gloved hands gripped his walking stick, its silver tip tapping rhythmically against the platform as he navigated through porters and passengers. The golden locket, that tantalizing clue from the deciphered page of Agatha Christie's lost manuscript, weighed heavily on his mind. Its connection to Margaret Hawley's unsolved murder, revealed through Mrs. Clara Beaumont's recollection of a rose-engraved locket, had set Poirot on a new path. The jeweler's record of a recent repair for a woman named AC suggested either Agatha Christie herself or an impostor was at play, and Poirot's little gray cells were alight with the challenge of unraveling this thread. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint tang of coal smoke and the chatter of newsboys hawking the day's headlines. Poirot's destination was the prestigious Harwood auction house in Mayfair, where the locket was scheduled for sale that very afternoon. He hailed a cab, his sharp eyes scanning the street for anything amiss. The driver, a ruddy-faced man with a thick Cockney accent, tipped his cap. "Where to, Governor?" "Harwood Auction House, if you please," Poirot replied, his voice precise and accented. "And do make haste. Time, it is of the essence." As the cab rattled through London streets, Poirot reviewed the facts. The manuscript page, hidden in Blackthorn Manor's secret compartment, had pointed to the locket as a key to Margaret Hawley's murder. The initials AC. In the jeweler's ledger were a puzzle, either a bold signature from the late Agatha Christie, whose genius for embedding truth in fiction was unmatched, or a cunning alias used by someone exploiting her legacy. The auction house, with its promise of the locket's appearance, was the next logical step. Yet Poirot's instincts warned him that danger lurked, for the locket's significance was unlikely to have gone unnoticed by those who wished the past to remain buried. The cab pulled up before a grand Georgian building, its facade adorned with columns and a polished brass sign reading Harwood Auction House, Est, 1872. Poirot paid the driver and stepped out, smoothing his mustache as he surveyed the entrance. A steady stream of well-dressed patrons flowed inside, their voices a low hum of anticipation. The auction was a high-profile event, attracting collectors of rare jewelry and antiquities, and Poirot knew he must blend in to avoid drawing attention. He adopted the air of a discerning connoisseur, his posture erect, his expression one of mild curiosity. Inside, the auction house was a vision of opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over mahogany paneling, and rows of velvet upholstered chairs faced a raised platform where a gavel rested on a podium. Display cases lined the walls, showcasing glittering treasures, emerald brooches, sapphire rings, and gold pocket watches. Poirot's eyes, however, sought one item alone, a golden locket engraved with a rose. He approached a clerk at the reception desk, a young man with slicked back hair and a nervous smile. "Good day, monsieur," Poirot said, his tone courteous but firm. "I am Hercule Poirot, a collector of rare antiquities. I understand a locket of particular interest is to be auctioned today. Might I see the catalogue?" The clerk hesitated, then handed over a leather-bound booklet. "Of course, sir. Lot 47 is the locket you might be referring to. It's described as a Victorian gold locket with a rose engraving, circa 1890. Quite a unique piece." Poirot flipped to the page, his eyes scanning the description. The locket matched Mrs. Beaumont's account perfectly, down to the delicate rose motif. Its estimated value was modest, suggesting its historical significance was not widely known. "And the provenance?" Poirot asked, his voice casual but probing. "Listed as from a private collection, sir," the clerk replied. "The seller wishes to remain anonymous." Poirot nodded, his mind noting the secrecy. An anonymous seller was not unusual, but in this case, it raised suspicions. He took a seat near the front, where he could observe both the bidders and the staff. The auction began with a flourish, the auctioneer, a tall man, with a booming voice commanding attention as he presented the first lot, a diamond tiara. Poirot's attention, however, was elsewhere. He scanned the room, his eyes darting from face to face, searching for any sign of the mysterious AC, or someone who seemed overly interested in lot for 7. As the lots progressed, Poirot's patience was rewarded. A woman in a navy blue coat, her face partially obscured by a wide-brimmed hat, entered the room and took a seat near the back. Her movements were deliberate, her posture tense. Poirot noted the way her gloved hands clutched a bidding paddle, her fingers twitching slightly. Could this be the woman who called herself AC? He resolved to watch her closely. When lot 47 was announced, the room's energy shifted. The auctioneer held up the locket, its gold surface catching the light. A fine Victorian locket, ladies and gentlemen, engraved with a rose motif. Bidding starts at £500. The woman in the navy coat raised her paddle immediately, her bid swift and decisive. Another bidder, an elderly man with a monocle, countered. The price climbed rapidly. 600, 700, 800 pounds. Poirot's eyes remained fixed on the woman, noting her increasing agitation as the bids rose. At 1,000 pounds, the elderly man bowed out, and the woman's paddle shot up again. The gavel fell, sold to the lady in the navy coat for 1,200 pounds. Poirot wasted no time. As the woman rose to collect her purchase, he maneuvered through the crowd, his small stature allowing him to slip between patrons unnoticed. He reached her just as she approached the payment desk, her hat still shielding her face. "Pardon, madame," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I am Hercule Poirot, and I have a great interest in the locket you have acquired. Might we speak?" For a moment, the woman froze, her hand tightening around the paddle. Then, without a word, she bolted toward the exit. Poirot, though not a man of physical prowess, was quick to react. He followed, weaving through the startled crowd, his cane tapping urgently. The woman darted into the street, where a waiting cab screeched to a halt. She climbed in, and the cab sped off before Poirot could reach it. Frustrated but undeterred, Poirot returned to the auction house. The clerk, now visibly flustered, was speaking to a senior staff member. Poirot approached, his charm disarming. "Monsieur, the lady who purchased the locket she left in some haste. Surely you have her details for the transaction." The senior staff member, a portly man with a walrus mustache, hesitated. "We respect our client's privacy, sir." Poirot leaned closer, his eyes gleaming with persuasion. "And I respect the need for justice, monsieur. The locket may be connected to a matter of great importance. I assure you, my intentions are honorable." The man relented, glancing at a ledger. She gave her name as in Carver and provided an address in Brighton for the invoice. "That's all I can tell you." Poirot's heart quickened. And Carver, AC. The initials aligned, and Brighton was a new lead. He thanked the man and stepped outside, his mind racing. The locket was no longer just a clue, it was a beacon drawing him deeper into the mystery. But as he hailed another cab, a sudden crash shattered his thoughts. A massive chandelier from the auction house's foyer plummeted to the pavement mere feet from where he stood, its crystals scattering like shards of ice. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The chandelier's fall was no accident, the cable had been cleanly cut. Someone knew he was closing in on the truth. He brushed dust from his coat, his resolve hardening. "To Brighton." "Then," he murmured, stepping into the cab. "The locket's trail grows warm, and Hercule Poirot does not falter." The journey to Brighton was a blur of rolling countryside and Poirot's racing thoughts. The near miss with the chandelier confirmed that his investigation threatened someone powerful or desperate. And Carver, whoever she was, held the key to the locket's secrets, and perhaps to Margaret Halley's murder. The train's rhythmic clatter did little to soothe Poirot's mind, which churned with possibilities. Wasn't Carver a descendant of Margaret Hale, seeking to uncover the truth? Or was she an agent of those who wished to keep it buried? And how did Agatha Christie's manuscript fit into this intricate web? Brighton greeted Poirot with the briny scent of the sea and the cries of gulls circling above the pier. The address from the auction house led to a dilapidated boarding house on a narrow street near the shore. The building's faded paint and sagging shutters suggested neglect, and Poirot's knock was answered by a landlady with a face like weathered driftwood. "What do you want?" she demanded, eyeing his polished appearance with suspicion. "I seek a Miss Carver," Poirot said, bowing slightly. "I understand she resides here," the landlady snorted. "Resided? Maybe. She cleared out 2 days ago. Paid up and left without a word. Dropped a notebook. Though, if that's any use to you." Poirot's interest piqued. "A notebook, you say? Might I see it, madame?" Grumbling, the landlady retrieved a small, leather-bound book from a drawer. Poirot opened it, his fingers careful not to smudge the pages. Inside were detailed sketches of Blackthorn Manor, its gabled roof, its ivy-covered walls, its library. With a hidden compartment, alongside the drawings, was a list of names: Margaret Hale, Dr. Victor Langley, Lord Reginald Blackthorne, and several others Poirot did not recognize. A shiver ran through him. This was no mere coincidence. The notebook, tied and carved directly to the manner and the murder. "Merci, madame," Poirot said, slipping the landlady a coin. "You have been most helpful." Back on the street, Poirot studied the notebook under the dim glow of a gas lamp. Dr. Victor Langley's name stood out. The retired physician, still living in Brighton according to local records, had been Margaret Hawley's doctor. If anyone knew the locket's significance, it might be him. Poirot hailed a cab and directed it to Langley's address, a modest cottage on the outskirts of town. The night was falling, and a fog rolled in from the sea, cloaking Brighton in a ghostly veil. Langley's cottage was dark save for a single light in the window. Poirot knocked, and the door creaked open to reveal an elderly man with a stooped posture and piercing blue eyes. "Who are you?" Langley asked, his voice sharp. "Hercule Poirot, monsieur. I investigate a matter concerning Margaret Hale and a certain locket. I believe you can assist me." Langley's face paled, but he gestured for Poirot to enter. The cottage was cluttered with medical books and faded photographs, a testament to a long career. Over a cup of weak tea, Langley spoke haltingly. "I was Margaret's doctor. The night she died, I saw her at Blackthorne Manor. She was wearing that locket, a gold one with a rose. She was frightened, said she'd discovered something about Lord Blackthorne. I urged her to go to the police, but she was found dead the next morning." Poirot leaned forward, his eyes intent. "And the locket, monsieur, what became of it?" Langley hesitated, then sighed. "I hid a letter inside it, Margaret's letter, accusing Blackthorne of threatening her over a family secret. I was afraid to come forward. After her death, the locket vanished. I thought it was lost forever until I heard rumors of it resurfacing, and this in Carver." Poirot pressed. "I don't know her," Langley admitted, "but if she has the locket, she has Margaret's letter. It's dangerous knowledge. Mr. Poirot." The conversation was cut short by a noise outside, a rustle in the garden. Poirot rose, his senses alert. Through the window, he glimpsed a shadow moving in the fog. "Stay here, monsieur," he said, stepping outside. The garden was empty, but a footprint in the damp earth confirmed someone had been watching. Poirot's mind raced. And Carver, the locket, and now a stalker in the fog. The pieces were aligning, but the puzzle was far from complete. Returning to Langley, Poirot pressed the notebook into his hands. "Keep this safe, monsieur. I will find Miss Carver and the locket. The truth, it will not remain hidden." As he left the cottage, the fog thickened, and Poirot felt the weight of the case pressing upon him. The locket's trail had led him from London to Brighton, from an auction house to a doctor's confession. Each step revealed a new layer of intrigue, yet danger loomed closer. And Carver was out there, and with her, the letter that could expose a murderer. Poirot's cane tapped against the cobblestones as he walked toward the pier, determined to find her before the shadowy forces trailing him struck again. The chapter closed with Poirot standing at the edge of Brighton Pier, the sea crashing below. The notebook sketches and names burned in his memory, and Langley's confession echoed in his ears. The locket was more than a trinket. It was a vessel of truth, and Poirot would not rest until he held it in his hands. The trail was perilous, but Hercule Poirot thrived on such challenges, and the mystery of Agatha Christie's clue was far from over. Chapter 6. Brighton's hidden truth. Hercule Poirot stepped off the train at Brighton Station, the salty tang of the sea air mingling with the faint coal smoke of the locomotive. The platform bustled with holiday makers, their laughter and chatter, a stark contrast to the detective's focused demeanor. His sharp eyes scanned the crowd, noting the hurried steps of a porter, the flutter of a woman's parasol, and the distant cry of gulls circling above the pier. The address clutched in his gloved hand, 17 Seaview Terrace, a boarding house in Brighton's less fashionable quarter, promised answers, but Poirot knew the path to truth was rarely straightforward. The near miss with the chandelier at the London auction house lingered in his mind, a warning that someone was watching. someone who wanted the trail to Margaret Hawley's killer to grow cold once more. He adjusted his Homburg hat, ensuring it sat precisely on his head, and set off toward the boarding house. The streets of Brighton unfolded in a patchwork of charm and decay. Elegant Regency terraces gave way to narrow lanes where paint peeled from shop fronts and the scent of fried fish hung heavy. Poirot's polished shoes clicked against the uneven cobblestones, each step measured, his mind turning over the clues like a jeweler inspecting a gem. The locket, the manuscript, the veiled woman calling herself and Carver, the threads were weaving together, but the pattern remained elusive. Why hadn't fled the auction? What secret did the locket hold that warranted such risk? Seaview Terrace was a misnomer, Poirot noted with a wry twist of his lips. The street offered no view of the sea, only a row of sagging boarding houses there, windows clouded with grime. Number 17 stood at the end, its faded sign proclaiming rooms to let in peeling letters. The door creaked as he pushed it open, revealing a dim hallway smelling of damp wood and boiled cabbage. A woman in her late 50s, her hair pinned in a severe bun, emerged from a side room. Her apron was stained, her eyes wary as they took in Poirot's impeccable suit and mustache, which he twirled lightly with a gloved finger. "Madame, I am Hercule Poirot," he said, his voice smooth as velvet. "I seek a guest of yours, a Mademoiselle and Carver." "It is a matter of some urgency," the landlady, who introduced herself as Mrs. Doris Grimsby, squinted at him. "And Carver, you say? She's not here. Packed up and left 2 days ago. Sudden like. Didn't even ask for her deposit back." Poirot's eyes narrowed, though his smile remained courteous. "Most curious. Might I inquire if Mademoiselle Carver left anything behind? A forwarding address, perhaps, or some personal item?" Mrs. Grimsby hesitated, her fingers twisting the edge of her apron. Poirot's gaze softened, his tone coaxing. "Madame, you have the air of one who observes much. Surely, you noticed something of this mysterious guest." Flattered, Mrs. Grimsby relented. "Well, she was a quiet one, kept to herself. Paid for a week up front, but only stayed 3 days. Always wore a scarf, even indoors, like she didn't want to be recognized. Yesterday, I found something in her room after she left." She shuffled to a drawer behind the counter and produced a small, leather-bound notebook, its edges frayed. "This was under the bed. I didn't know what to do with it." Poirot's heart quickened, though his face betrayed nothing. "May I?" he asked, extending a hand. Mrs. Grimsby handed over the notebook, and Poirot opened it with care, as if handling a rare manuscript. The pages were filled with sketches, precise, almost obsessive drawings of Blackthorn Manor, its turrets and gables rendered in fine ink. Interspersed were lists of names, some crossed out, others underlined. Margaret Hawley's name appeared, repeatedly, circled in red ink. Another name caught his eye, Dr. Victor Langley, followed by an address in Brighton's Kemptown district. "This is most helpful, Madame Grimsby," Poirot said, slipping the notebook into his pocket. "You have my gratitude. One final question. Did Mademoiselle Carver receive visitors, or did she mention her plans?" "No visitors," Mrs. Grimsby replied, shaking her head. "But she was always scribbling in that book, muttering about finding the truth. Once, I overheard her on the telephone in the hall, saying something about a doctor. Didn't catch more than that." Poirot tipped his hat. "You have been most kind. Should Mademoiselle Carver return, please inform her that Hercule Poirot wishes to speak with her. It is, I assure you, in her interest." Leaving the boarding house, Poirot felt the weight of the notebook in his pocket, a tangible link to Carver's intentions. The sketches of Blackthorn Manor suggested an obsession with the estate, perhaps tied to Margaret Hawley's murder. The mention of Dr. Victor Langley was no coincidence. Poirot's little gray cells hummed with the certainty that this doctor held a key to the puzzle. He hailed a cab and directed it to Kemptown, the notebook open on his lap as he studied the sketches. One drawing depicted a specific window on the manor's west wing, annotated with the words "secret passage." Poirot's mustache twitched. Could this be the passage where Margaret met her fate? Kemptown was quieter than the bustling seafront, its streets lined with modest villas and the occasional tea-room. Dr. Langley's address, 42 Rosemary Lane, was a neat, two-story house with ivy climbing its facade. Poirot rang the bell, and after a moment, the door opened to reveal an elderly man with a stooped posture and sharp blue eyes. His white hair was thinning, but his gaze was alert, assessing Poirot with a mix of curiosity and caution. "Dr. Victor Langley?" Poirot inquired, bowing slightly. "I am Hercule Poirot, a detective. I wish to speak with you regarding a matter from the past, a matter concerning Margaret Hale." Langley's face paled, his hand tightening on the doorframe. "Margaret Hale, that's a name I haven't heard in years. What business have you with her? May we speak inside, monsieur? It is a delicate matter, and the street is not the place for such discussions." Reluctantly, Langley ushered Poirot into a cluttered parlor, where medical books and old photographs lined the shelves. A faded portrait of a young woman with a rose-shaped locket caught Poirot's eye. Margaret Hale, he was certain. He seated himself, his posture impeccable, and fixed Langley with a steady gaze. "Dr. Langley, you were Margaret Hale's physician, were you not? On the night of her death, you saw her. I have reason to believe you know more than was shared with the authorities." Langley's hands trembled as he sank into a chair. "You're digging up ghosts, Mr. Poirot. Margaret's death was a tragedy, but it was ruled an accident. A fall down the stairs at Blackthorn Manor." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "An accident, you say? Yet the locket she wore, engraved with a rose, vanished that night. And now, a woman named Carver seeks this locket, claiming it holds a secret. What do you know of this, Doctor?" Langley's gaze darted to the portrait, then back to Poirot. I saw the locket that night." Margaret was agitated, speaking of a letter she'd written, something she wanted kept safe. She said it was inside the locket. I urged her to go to the police, but she refused. She was afraid of someone powerful, and this letter. Poirot pressed, leaning forward. "Did you see it?" Langley hesitated, his voice dropping to a whisper. "After she died, I found the locket in her room. I opened it, thinking, to honor her wishes. The letter was there, a single page, accusing Lord Reginald Blackthorn of threatening her life. I hid it. I was afraid. Blackthorn was a man of influence, and I was young, with a career to protect." Poirot's expression remained impassive, but his mind raced. "And where is this letter now, Doctor?" "I believe Carver has it," Langley confessed. "She came to me a week ago, asking about Margaret. She said she was her great-niece. Determined to uncover the truth, I told her about the locket, and she left in a hurry. I think she's gone to confront someone at Blackthorn Manor." Poirot rose, his movements precise. "You have done well to tell me this, Doctor, but you must know that Carver is in danger. Those who wish to keep this secret buried are not above violence." Langley's face crumpled. "I never meant for this to happen. If I'd spoken up years ago, the past cannot be changed." Poirot interrupted gently, "But the present offers a chance for justice. Tell me, Doctor, didn't mention where she might go next." "She spoke of the pier," Langley said she needed to think, to plan her next move. "She mentioned meeting someone there tonight." Poirot nodded, his mind already mapping the path ahead. "Merci, Dr. Langley, you have provided a piece of the puzzle. I will find Mademoiselle Carver and ensure her safety." As he left the house, the sea breeze carried a chill, and Poirot pulled his coat tighter. The Brighton pier loomed in the distance, its lights twinkling against the darkening sky. He walked briskly, the notebook and Langley's confession fueling his resolve. The letter inside the locket was the key, a direct accusation against Lord Blackthorn, suppressed for decades, but who was following Anne. And why had the chandelier fallen so conveniently at the auction house? The pier was alive with activity, its wooden boards thrumming with the footsteps of revelers. Poirot navigated the crowd, his eyes scanning for a woman matching Anne's description, slight build, dark hair, perhaps still wearing a scarf to obscure her face. Near the end of the pier, where the noise of the fairground faded into the crash of waves, he spotted her. She stood alone, leaning against the railing, a scarf fluttering in the wind. In her hand was a small, gleaming object, the locket. Mademoiselle Carver, Poirot called softly, approaching with care. She startled, her eyes wide with fear, but she didn't run. "Who are you?" she demanded, clutching the locket tightly. "Hercule Poirot, at your service," he said, bowing. "I know you seek justice from Margaret Hale, your great aunt. I know of the letter, and I know you are in danger. Will you trust me?" Anne's shoulders slumped, the fight draining from her. "I've been running for days," she admitted. "I found the locket at the auction, but someone's been following me ever since. I think they know I have the letter." She opened the locket, revealing a folded scrap of paper, yellowed with age. Poirot took it gently, his eyes scanning the cramped handwriting. It was as Langley described, a desperate note from Margaret, naming Lord Reginald Blackthorne as her killer, detailing his threats to silence her over a disputed inheritance. The letter was a bombshell, capable of rewriting the history of the Hale case. "You have done well to protect this, mademoiselle," Poirot said, "but you must let me help you. Those who follow you may be connected to Blackthorne's descendants, determined to keep this secret buried," and nodded, tears in her eyes. "I just wanted her story to be told. She deserved better, and she shall have it," Poirot promised, "but first, we must ensure your safety. Come, we will return to my hotel, where we can plan our next steps." As they walked back along the pier, Poirot's senses were on high alert. A shadow moved in the crowd, too deliberate to be a casual stroller. He quickened his pace, guiding in toward the brighter lights of the promenade. The chapter closed with the weight of the letter in his pocket, a tangible link to Margaret's truth, and the certainty that danger was closing in. Yet the discovery of the letter provided a thrilling resolution to the Brighton pursuit, propelling the mystery toward its next revelation. Chapter 7. The letter's confession. Brighton Pier stretched into the sea like a weathered finger, its wooden planks creaking under the weight of holiday makers and the relentless assault of salt air. Hercule Poirot stood at the pier's edge, his gloved hands clasped behind his back, his mustache twitching as he inhaled the briny breeze. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows, painting the scene in hues of gold and gray. But Poirot's mind was far from the picturesque. His little gray cells churned, piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that had led him from a dusty royal library to this bustling seaside town. The locket, the manuscript, the veiled woman, each was a thread in a tapestry of deception. And now, at last, he was close to unraveling it. And Carver, the woman who had fled the London auction house, was somewhere here, in Brighton. The address she had left with the auctioneer, a dilapidated boarding house on a narrow street, had yielded little but a notebook filled with cryptic sketches and names, one of which, Margaret Hale, had sent a jolt through Poirot's meticulous mind. The revelation from Dr. Victor Langley, the retired physician, that he had hidden a letter inside Margaret's locket the night she died had only deepened the mystery. That letter, Poirot suspected, held the key to the decades-old murder and the vanished manuscript of Agatha Christie. He adjusted his hat, shielding his eyes from the sun's glare, and scanned the crowd. Families laughed, children clutched sticky candy floss, and couples strolled arm in arm, oblivious to the drama unfolding in their midst. Poirot's gaze lingered on a solitary figure near the pier's railing, a woman in a gray coat, her dark hair tucked beneath a simple scarf. Her posture was tense, her hands fidgeting with something small and metallic. Could it be the locket? Poirot's heart quickened, but he maintained his composure, his steps deliberate as he approached. "Madame," he said softly, his voice carrying just enough authority to startle her. The woman turned, her eyes wide, and Poirot noted the flicker of recognition and fear in her expression. "I am Hercule Poirot, and I believe you are Mademoiselle Carver." Her hand tightened around the object, and for a moment Poirot thought she might bolt. But she held her ground, her lips pressing into a thin line. "You've been following me," she said, her voice low but steady. Why? Poirot inclined his head, his eyes never leaving hers. Because, mademoiselle, you possess something of great importance not only to you, but to the memory of a young woman who died long ago, and to the truth that has been buried with her. Anne's gaze darted to the sea, then back to Poirot. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her voice wavered. Permit me to disagree, Poirot replied, his tone gentle but firm. The locket you hold, the notebook you left behind, the name Margaret Hale, they all point to a story that you know well. I ask only that you share it with me, so that justice may be served. For a long moment, Anne said nothing, her eyes searching Poirot's face as if weighing his intentions. Then, with a sigh, she opened her hand, revealing the golden locket engraved with a delicate rose. You're right, she said at last. I'm Margaret Hawley's great-niece. I've been trying to find out what happened to her, to clear her name. She wasn't just a victim, she was betrayed. Poirot's mustache twitched with satisfaction, but he kept his expression neutral. Come, mademoiselle, he said, gesturing toward a nearby bench. Let us sit, and you will tell me everything. They settled on the bench, the peer's clamor fading into the background as Anne began her tale. Her voice was soft at first, hesitant, but it grew stronger as she spoke of her family's whispered stories about Margaret Hale, the heiress whose life had been cut short in St. Mary's Hollow. My grandmother was Margaret's sister, and said. She never believed the official story that Margaret's death was an accident, that she fell from a cliff during a storm. She said Margaret was too careful, too clever. And then, a few years ago, I found a letter among my grandmother's things, written by Margaret just before she died. It wasn't finished, but it hinted at something terrible someone she trusted had turned against her. Poirot listened intently, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. In this letter, he said, it is the one hidden inside the locket. Anne nodded, her fingers trembling as she opened the locket. From within, she withdrew a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age but carefully preserved. Dr. Langley gave it to me, she said. He said he found it in Margaret's hand the night she died, but he was too afraid to come forward. He hid it in the locket, thinking it would be safe. When I tracked him down, he told me everything, how he'd kept it secret all these years, how he regretted not speaking out. Poirot took the letter with delicate precision, unfolding it with the care one might use for a priceless artifact. The handwriting was elegant, but hurried, the ink faded in places, but still legible. He read silently, his eyes narrowing as the words painted a picture of betrayal and fear. My dearest Clara, I write in haste, for I fear my time is short. Lord Reginald Blackthorne is not the man he seems. His charm hides a darkness, and I have seen it. Tonight, I confronted him about the land. He seeks to claim our land, Clara. He laughed, but his eyes were cold. I fear he will stop at nothing. To silence me, if I do not return, know that it was no accident. The locket holds my proof. Find it, Clara, and expose him. Yours, Margaret. Poirot's mind raced as he folded the letter and returned it to Anne. Lord Reginald Blackthorne, the powerful figure who had once dominated St. Mary's Hollow, was the key to Margaret's murder. But why had the manuscript vanished now, decades later? And what role did Agatha Christie play in this tangled web? Mademoiselle, Poirot said, his voice low, this letter is a confession? Yes, but it is also a clue. It suggests that Margaret left evidence, proof of Blackthorne's guilt. Do you know what this proof might be? Anne shook her head, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I've been searching for it, she said. That's why I went to the auction, why I've been following every lead I could find. The notebook you found, it's everything I've pieced together. Sketches of Blackthorne Manor, names of people who might know something, but I'm no detective, Monsieur Poirot. I'm just a woman who wants justice for her family. Poirot placed a reassuring hand on her arm. You have done well, mademoiselle, and now you are not alone. Hercule Poirot will see this through. As they spoke, Poirot's keen eyes caught a flicker of movement in the crowd, a man in a dark coat, lingering too long near a stall selling trinkets. His face was partially obscured by a hat, but his posture betrayed a calculated interest in their conversation. Poirot's instincts flared. "Mademoiselle," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "we are being watched. Do not turn, but be cautious. This man, I believe, is following you." Anne's breath hitched, but she nodded, her composure returning. "What do we do?" she asked. "For now, we continue as if unaware," Poirot said, "but we must move quickly. The letter points us to Blackthorn Manor, and I suspect the proof Margaret spoke of is hidden there. We will return to St. Mary's Hollow, but first, I must ensure your safety." They rose from the bench, Poirot guiding him through the crowd with the ease of a man accustomed to navigating danger. The man in the dark coat followed at a distance, his steps measured but persistent. Poirot's mind worked furiously, cataloguing every detail: the man's height, his gait, the way his hand hovered near his pocket, as if ready to draw something, a weapon, or perhaps another clue. As they reached the pier's entrance, Poirot hailed a taxi and ushered him inside. "To the Brighton Library," he instructed the driver, then leaned close to Anne. "We will lose our pursuer there," he said, "and we will find more answers. The library holds records of St. Mary's Hollow newspapers, deeds, anything that might confirm Lord Blackthorn's motives." The taxi wove through Brighton's bustling streets, the pier fading into the distance. Poirot glanced out the rear window, noting with satisfaction that the man in the dark coat had been left behind, though he suspected it was only a temporary reprieve. The game, as Sherlock Holmes might have said, was afoot, and Poirot was determined to stay one step ahead. The Brighton Library was a grand, Victorian structure, its stone facade weathered but imposing. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old books and polished wood. Poirot approached the librarian, a stern woman with spectacles perched on her nose, and requested access to the archives. "I seek information on St. Mary's Hollow," he said, his accent lending an air of authority. "Particularly anything related to Lord Reginald Blackthorn and the Hale family." The librarian raised an eyebrow but complied, leading them to a basement room lined with shelves of bound newspapers and ledgers. "You'll find what you need here," she said. Leaving them to their work, Poirot and Anne set to work, their fingers tracing the faded print of decades-old articles. The hours passed in a blur, the only sounds the rustle of paper and the occasional murmur of discovery. At last, Poirot found what he sought: a series of articles from the 1890s, detailing a bitter dispute over land between the Hale family and Lord Blackthorn. The Hales, it seemed, owned a valuable parcel of land rich in coal deposits, land that Blackthorn coveted for his expanding estate. When Margaret's father refused to sell, tensions escalated, culminating in Margaret's mysterious death. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his eyes gleaming. "This confirms the motive. Blackthorn wished to silence Margaret to secure the land. But there is more. Look here." He pointed to a small notice buried in the corner of a page, announcing the engagement of Margaret Hale to a young man named Thomas Carver, and gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Thomas Carver was my great-grandfather," she said. "He left St. Mary's Hollow after Margaret's death, heartbroken. He never spoke of it, but my grandmother said he believed Margaret was murdered." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "This engagement explains much. Margaret's marriage to Carver would have strengthened her claim to the land, making her a greater threat to Blackthorn. Her death was no accident, it was a calculated act to protect his interests." As they continued their search, and uncovered a ledger detailing Blackthorn's financial transactions. Among the entries was a payment to a man named Silas Reed, described as a consultant. The date of the payment coincided with the week of Margaret's death. "Who was Silas Reed?" Anne asked, her voice trembling. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A man of ill repute, perhaps, a hired hand, paid to do Blackthorn's dirty work. We must find out more about him." Their work was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. The librarian entered, her expression apologetic. "I'm sorry, but there's a gentleman asking for you, Monsieur Poirot. He says it's urgent." Poirot exchanged a glance with Anne, his instincts on high alert. "Stay here," he told her. "I will see who this is." He followed the librarian to the library's entrance, where a tall man in a dark coat waited. Poirot recognized him at once, the man from the pier. Up close, his face was gaunt, his eyes cold and calculating. "Monsieur Poirot," the man said, his voice smooth but edged with menace. "You're meddling in affairs that don't concern you. Leave Brighton, and take the woman with you, or there will be consequences." Poirot's mustache twitched, but his expression remained serene. "And who, monsieur, gives me this warning?" he asked. The man smirked. "Someone who knows the cost of digging up the past. You've been warned." With that, he turned and vanished into the evening crowd. Poirot returned to Anne, his mind racing. "We are close, mademoiselle," he said, "too close for someone's comfort. This man, I suspect, is connected to Blackthorn's descendants. They wish to keep Margaret's secret buried." Anne's face paled, but her resolve hardened. "What do we do now?" she asked. "We return to St. Mary's Hollow," Poirot said. "The answers lie in Blackthorn Manor, and we must find them before our enemies do." The train journey back to St. Mary's Hollow was tense, the rhythmic clatter of the wheels doing little to soothe Poirot's nerves. And sat across from him, the locket clutched tightly in her hand, her eyes fixed on the passing countryside. Poirot, meanwhile, reviewed the facts in his mind, arranging them like pieces on a chessboard. The letter, the land dispute, Silas Reed. The man in the dark coat each was a move in a game that had begun decades ago, with Margaret Hawley's murder. As the train pulled into the village station, the mist of St. Mary's Hollow enveloped them, its chill seeping into their bones. Poirot led into the cozy inn where he had stayed before, securing a room for her under an assumed name. "Rest, mademoiselle," he said. "Tomorrow we will visit Blackthorn Manor, and we will find the proof Margaret left behind." That night, Poirot sat by the inn's fire, a glass of tisane in hand, his mind racing. The man's warning echoed in his ears, but Poirot was undeterred. He had faced danger before, and he would not falter now. The truth, he knew, was within reach, and he would seize it, no matter the cost. The following morning dawned gray and damp, the village shrouded in fog. Poirot and Anne set out for Blackthorn Manor, their steps muffled by the wet grass. The manor loomed ahead, its stone walls dark and forbidding, its windows like empty eyes. The caretaker, an elderly man with a limp, greeted them warily, but Poirot's charm soon won him over. "I am a historian," Poirot said, his accent lending an air of authenticity. "I seek information on the Hale family and their connection to this estate." The caretaker hesitated, then nodded. "Come inside," he said, "but don't expect much. The Blackthorns don't like their past disturbed." Inside, the manor was a maze of shadowed halls and dusty rooms, its grandeur faded but still imposing. Poirot's eyes scanned every detail: the portraits on the walls, the creak of the floorboards, the faint scent of mildew. As the caretaker led them to the library, Poirot's gaze fell on a heavy oak desk, its surface scarred with age. Something about it tugged at his memory: the ink stain in the rural library, the letter's quill. Could this desk hold another clue? "May I examine this desk?" Poirot asked, his tone casual. The caretaker shrugged. "If you like. It's been here since Lord Reginald's time." Poirot ran his fingers over the desk, his touch light but deliberate. In a drawer, he found a bundle of old letters, their edges brittle. One caught his eye: a note addressed to Silas Reed, signed by Lord Blackthorn. The contents were brief but damning. "The matter must be settled tonight. Ensure no one sees you." Poirot's heart quickened, but he kept his expression neutral. "This is most interesting," he said, slipping the note into his pocket. "Thank you, monsieur." As they left the library, Poirot noticed a faint outline in the wall, a hidden panel, barely visible in the dim light. He pressed gently, and the panel clicked open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. "Mon Dieu," he murmured. Margaret's proof lies below. Anne's eyes widened, but she nodded, her resolve unshaken. Together, they descended the stairs, their footsteps echoing in the confined space. At the bottom, they found a small chamber, its walls lined with shelves of old ledgers and boxes. In one box, Poirot found a sealed envelope, its wax seal unbroken. The handwriting on the front was Margaret's, with trembling hands, and opened the envelope, revealing a single sheet of paper. It was a map, crudely drawn, but clear. Marking a spot in the manor's grounds labeled the truth. Below the map was a note: "If I am gone, this will lead you to the evidence. Trust no one." Poirot's mind raced. "This map," he said. "It points to the final piece of the puzzle. We must find this spot before our enemies do." They emerged from the chamber, the map safely tucked in Poirot's pocket. As they stepped into the manor's grounds, the fog thickened, obscuring the landscape. Poirot's senses were on high alert, his every nerve attuned to the slightest sound. Somewhere in the distance, a twig snapped, and Poirot's hand tightened on his cane. "Stay close, mademoiselle," he whispered. "We are not alone." They followed the map's directions, navigating through the overgrown gardens to a small stone structure half hidden by ivy. It was an old well, its mouth sealed with a heavy iron grate. Poirot examined the grate, noting the fresh scratches in the metal. Someone had been here recently, dealt with Anne's help. He pried the grate open, revealing a dark shaft descending into the earth. Using a torch from his pocket, Poirot illuminated the interior, spotting a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth at the bottom. He lowered himself carefully, his movements precise despite the cramped space. The bundle was heavy, its contents rattling as he retrieved it. Back on the surface, Poirot unwrapped the oilcloth, revealing a collection of documents, letters, contracts, and a signed confession from Silas Reed, detailing how Lord Blackthorne had paid him to murder Margaret Hale. The confession was witnessed by a local magistrate, its authenticity undeniable. Anne's eyes filled with tears as she read the confession. "This is it," she said, her voice breaking. "This is what Margaret wanted the world to know." Poirot nodded, his expression grim. "And now, mademoiselle, we must ensure it is known. But first, we must escape this place." As they turned to leave, a figure emerged from the fog, the man in the dark coat, his face now fully visible. In his hand was a revolver, its barrel glinting in the torchlight. "You've gone too far, Poirot," he said, his voice cold. "Hand over the documents, and I might let you live." Poirot's mind raced, calculating his options. The man was alone, but he was armed, and the fog made escape difficult. Yet Poirot had faced worse odds before, and he would not yield now. "Monsieur," he said, his voice calm, "you mistake me for a man who surrenders. I propose instead that you lower your weapon, for you are outnumbered." The man frowned, glancing around, but before he could react, a shout rang out from the fog. The caretaker, alerted by their prolonged absence, had followed them, bringing with him two village constables. The man in the dark coat hesitated, then dropped his revolver, his shoulders slumping in defeat. As the constables took him into custody, Poirot turned to Anne, the documents still clutched in his hand. "The truth, mademoiselle, has prevailed," he said. "Margaret's justice is at hand." The chapter closed with Poirot and in returning to the inn, the fog lifting to reveal a sky streaked with the colors of dawn. The documents were safe, the man in custody, but Poirot knew the case was not yet over. Blackthorne's descendants, he suspected, would not rest until the truth was buried again. Yet for now, a milestone had been reached, a confession unearthed, and the memory of Margaret Hale honored. The game was far from over, but Hercule Poirot was ready for the next move. Chapter 8. The Blackthorne legacy. Hercule Poirot stood at the gates of Blackthorne Manor, the mist curling around the iron bars like ghostly fingers. The estate loomed ahead, its ivy-clad walls and dark windows exuding an air of secrecy that matched the village's whispers. The discovery of Margaret Hawley's letter, hidden within the rose-engraved locket, had brought him back to St. Mary's Hollow. The letter's accusation against Lord Reginald Blackthorne, A man whose influence once silenced an entire village was a threat Poirot could not ignore. Yet, the detective's little gray cells buzzed with the certainty that the past was not buried alone. Someone in the present was guarding its secrets. The gravel crunched under Poirot's polished shoes as he approached the manor's oak door, its brass knocker shaped like a snarling lion. He rapped sharply, the sound echoing through the stillness. Moments later, the door creaked open, revealing a wiry man in a faded butler's uniform. His eyes, shadowed by heavy brows, darted nervously. "Monsieur Poirot, is it?" the butler asked, his voice low. "Master Edward is expecting you." Poirot inclined his head, noting the butler's trembling hands. "Merci, monsieur. Lead the way, if you please." The butler, who introduced himself as Mr. Grayson, guided Poirot through a grand hall adorned with portraits of stern-faced blackthorns. The air was thick with the scent of polished wood and old secrets. Grayson paused before a set of double doors, knocked softly, and announced Poirot's arrival. Edward Blackthorne, the grandson of the accused Lord Reginald, stood by a roaring fireplace in the study. He was a tall man in his late 30s, with sharp cheekbones and hair the color of wet slate. His tailored suit spoke of wealth, but his restless fingers betrayed unease. Behind him, shelves groaned under the weight of leather-bound books, and a massive desk held a single silver inkwell, gleaming in the firelight. "Monsieur Poirot," Edward said, forcing a smile, "to what do I owe this unexpected visit? I thought your business in St. Mary's Hollow was concluded." Poirot removed his hat and placed it on a nearby chair, his movements deliberate. "Non, monsieur, the business, it is far from concluded. There are threads, most curious threads, that lead me back to this very manor." Edward's smile faltered. "Threads? I'm afraid I don't follow." Poirot's eyes gleamed as he paced the room, his cane tapping softly against the parquet floor. "Permit me to clarify. A manuscript, penned by the great Agatha Christie, has vanished. A locket, once belonging to the unfortunate Mademoiselle Margaret Hale, has resurfaced. And a letter, hidden within that locket, points to a crime committed under this roof. These are not mere coincidences, Monsieur Blackthorne." Edward's jaw tightened, but he gestured to a leather armchair. "Sit, please. You're speaking in riddles, Poirot. If you have accusations, make them plainly." Poirot declined the seat, preferring to stand where he could observe Edward's every twitch. "Very well. The letter, written by Mademoiselle Hale, accuses your grandfather, Lord Reginald Blackthorne, of her murder. It is a grave charge, n'est-ce pas? And yet, I find it curious that the manuscript containing clues to this very crime was stolen from the library mere days ago. Tell me, monsieur, what do you know of this manuscript?" Edward's face paled, though he recovered quickly, crossing his arms. "Nothing. I've never heard of any manuscript, and my grandfather died long before I was born. These are old stories, Poirot, village gossip. Nothing more." Poirot tilted his head, his mustache twitching. "Gossip, perhaps, but the ink stain in the library, the train ticket in London, the page found in your manor's hidden compartment, they are not gossip. They are facts, and facts, Monsieur Blackthorne, are the bricks with which Hercule Poirot builds his case." Edward's eyes darted to the desk, then back to Poirot. "You're mistaken. I have no connection to any of this." Poirot stepped closer, his voice soft but unyielding. "Then you will not object if I examine this room?" "Non. A study such as this, in a manor so old, often hides secrets of its own." Edward hesitated, his fingers curling into fists. "This is my home, Poirot. You can't just amaze me." "I can," Poirot interrupted, his tone sharp. "With the permission of the local magistrate, of course. I have spoken with him this morning, and he is most interested in the matter of Mademoiselle Hawley's murder. Shall I summon him, or will you indulge me?" Edward's shoulders sagged, and he waved a hand dismissively. "Do as you like." "You'll find nothing." Poirot's smile was polite but predatory. He began his inspection, his gloved fingers tracing the edges of bookshelves, tapping panels, and examining the desk drawers. Edward watched, his posture rigid, as Grayson hovered near the door. The fire crackled, casting long shadows across the room. As Poirot approached a portrait of Lord Reginald, a stern man with piercing eyes, he noticed a faint seam in the wood panel beneath it. He pressed gently, and with a soft click, a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow compartment. Inside was a small iron safe, its surface etched with intricate vines. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, turning to Edward. What have we here? Edward's face drained of color. I don't know what that is. This house is ancient. There are countless oddities. Poirot arched an eyebrow. Oddities, indeed. Grayson, fetch a tool to open this. Silvu. Plot. The butler hesitated, glancing at Edward, who nodded curtly. Grayson returned moments later with a crowbar, and Poirot, with surprising dexterity, pried open the safe. Inside was a single item, a folded sheet of paper, yellowed with age, bearing the unmistakable handwriting of Agatha Christie. Poirot unfolded it carefully, his eyes scanning the text. It was another page of the missing manuscript, describing a secret passage in Blackthorn Manor where Margaret Hale was last seen alive. The page hinted at a confrontation, a struggle, and a betrayal, but stopped abruptly, as though torn from a larger work. This, Poirot said, holding the page aloft, is no oddity, Monsieur Blackthorn. It is evidence. Edward lunged forward, but Poirot stepped nimbly aside, tucking the page into his coat. Calm yourself, monsieur. Violence will not erase the truth. Edward sank into a chair, his hands covering his face. You don't understand. That manuscript, it could ruin everything. My family's name, our legacy, it's all I have. Poirot's expression softened, but only slightly. The truth, it is not always kind, but it is necessary. Tell me, monsieur, why did you steal the manuscript? To protect your grandfather's memory, or something more? Edward's voice was barely a whisper. I didn't steal it. I only hid it. When I found it in the library, I recognized my grandfather's name. I couldn't let it be published. Poirot nodded, his mind piecing together the puzzle. And the woman? And Carver. Did you know she was Margaret's great-niece? Seeking justice, Edward looked up, startled. Anne, I've never met her. I swear it. Poirot studied him, searching for deceit, but found only desperation. He turned to the fireplace, his gaze lingering on the flames. Then there is another player in this game, one who moves in the shadows. But fear not, Monsieur Blackthorn. Hercule Poirot will find them. Leaving Edward under Grayson's watchful eye, Poirot exited the study, the manuscript page burning a hole in his pocket. The manor's halls seemed to close in around him, each creak of the floorboards a reminder of the secrets they held. He needed to see the secret passage described in the manuscript, a place where Margaret Hawley's life had ended. The page had mentioned a staircase hidden behind a tapestry in the east wing. Poirot navigated the manor's labyrinth in corridors, his cane echoing in the silence. At last, he found the east wing, its windows shrouded in heavy drapes. A faded tapestry depicting a hunt hung against one wall, its threads frayed but intact. Poirot lifted it, revealing a stone archway and a spiral staircase descending into darkness. He lit a match, its feeble glow illuminating damp walls and cobwebs. The air grew colder as he descended, his steps cautious. At the bottom, the staircase opened into a narrow passage, its floor covered in dust undisturbed for decades. Poirot's heart quickened as he noticed faint marks in the dust, footprints, perhaps, or signs of a struggle long past. Kneeling, he examined the floor, his gloved fingers brushing the surface. There, preserved in the dry air, were spakes of something dark and brittle. He lifted a sample to the match light, his breath catching. Blood, old, but unmistakable. Mon Dieu, Poirot whispered, his mind racing. This was no mere passage, it was the scene of Margaret Hawley's murder. The manuscript had led him to the truth, But the truth was not yet complete. Who had ensured the manuscript's disappearance? And why was Edward so determined to hide it? Poirot retraced his steps, the match guttering out as he reached the tapestry. The manor felt heavier now, its secrets pressing against him. He needed to speak with Carver again to confirm her role in this tangled web. But first, he would return to the inn where he could study the manuscript page in safety. The village was quiet as Poirot walked back, the mist swallowing the manor behind him. At the inn, he found the landlord, Mr. Thompson, polishing glasses. Behind the bar, "Evening, Monsieur Poirot," Thompson said, his tone cheerful. "Any luck with your inquiries?" Poirot smiled faintly. "The luck, it is not necessary when one has method. But tell me, monsieur, have you seen Mademoiselle Carver today?" Thompson shook his head. "Not since yesterday. She keeps to herself. That one, left early this morning, said she was visiting the churchyard." Poirot thanked him and retired to his room, locking the door behind him. He spread the manuscript page on the table, its words a beacon in the dim lamplight. The description of the passage was vivid, almost as though Christie had seen it herself. But how had she known? Had she visited Blackthorn Manor? Or had someone confided in her? As Poirot pondered, a soft knock interrupted his thoughts. He opened the door to find Carver, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, glancing down the hall. "I must speak with you. It's urgent." Poirot ushered her inside, noting her trembling hands. "Calm yourself, mademoiselle. What has happened?" And clutched her shawl, her voice barely audible. "I went to the churchyard today, to Margaret's grave. There was a man there, a stranger. He was digging, Monsieur Poirot, near her headstone. When he saw me, he ran." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Digging? For what purpose?" "I don't know," and said, her voice breaking, "but I found this, dropped in the grass." She held out a small object, a silver key, its handle engraved with a rose. Poirot took it, his mind whirling. The rose motif again linked to Margaret's locket, to the manuscript, to the blackthorns. "This key, mademoiselle, it may unlock more than a door. You were wise to bring it to me." And nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. "I'm afraid, Monsieur Poirot, someone doesn't want the truth to come out." Poirot placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Fear not, mademoiselle. Hercule Poirot protects those who seek justice. Return to your room, lock the door, and speak to no one until I call for you." After and left, Poirot examined the key, its weight reassuring in his palm. It was too small for a door, perhaps meant for a box or a drawer. He would need to return to Blackthorn Manor to search for what it might open. But first, he needed rest. His little gray cells required clarity for the challenges ahead. The next morning, Poirot rose early, the key tucked safely in his waistcoat. He breakfasted lightly, ignoring the inn's heavy porridge in favor of toast and tea. The village was stirring as he set out, the church bells tolling in the distance. He decided to visit the churchyard first, to see the site of Anne's encounter. The churchyard was a quiet place, its gravestones weathered by time. Margaret Hawley's grave was easy to find, marked by a simple stone engraved with her name and dates. The earth near the headstone was disturbed, as though someone had begun digging but stopped abruptly. Poirot knelt, sifting through the soil, but found nothing save a few pebbles and roots. He stood, brushing dirt from his gloves, when a shadow fell across the grave. Turning, he saw Dr. Victor Langley, the retired physician, leaning on a cane. "Monsieur Poirot," Langley said, his voice gruff, "I heard you were poking about. Found anything interesting?" Poirot's smile was polite but guarded. "Perhaps, monsieur. And you, what brings you to this place?" Langley shrugged, his eyes flicking to the grave. "Old habits. I visit Margaret's grave now and then. She was my patient, you know." "Indeed," Poirot said, stepping closer. "And you saw her locket the night she died?" "Non. A locket that contained a letter accusing Lord Blackthorn." "Tell me, doctor, Did you ever suspect him? Langley's grip tightened on his cane. Suspect? Of course I did. But Reginald was untouchable. He owned half the village, still does, through his grandson. Poirot nodded, filing away the bitterness in Langley's tone. And this key, Doctor, does it mean anything to you? He held it up, watching Langley's reaction. The old man's eyes widened, then narrowed. Where did you get that? Answer. The question, s'il vous plaît, Langley sighed, his shoulders slumping. It looks like the key to Margaret's jewelry box. She kept it in her room at the manor. After she died, it vanished. Poirot's pulse quickened. And where is this box now? Langley shook his head. Gone, I assume. The Blackthorns cleared out her things. Poirot thanked him and turned away, his mind racing. The jewelry box, if it still existed, might hold more clues. Perhaps another piece of the manuscript. He needed to return to Blackthorn Manor, to confront Edward again and search for the box. The manor was quieter this time, as though holding its breath. Grayson admitted Poirot without protest, leading him to the study where Edward sat, staring into the fire. Monsieur Blackthorn, Poirot said, his voice cutting through the silence. We must speak of a jewelry box. One that belonged to Mademoiselle Hale. Edward looked up, his eyes hollow. A jewelry box. I don't know what you mean. Poirot produced the key, holding it before Edward's face. This was found near Margaret's grave. It unlocks her box? Nong. Where is it? Edward's hands trembled, but he shook his head. I've never seen it. You're grasping at straws, Poirot. Poirot's gaze hardened. Then you will not mind if I search her former room. Lead me there, or I will summon the magistrate. Edward rose, his movements slow, and led Poirot up a grand staircase to a wing of the manor that felt abandoned. Margaret's room was small but elegant, its furniture covered in dust sheets. Poirot began his search, checking drawers, tapping walls, and lifting the rug. Under the bed, he found a loose floorboard, which he pried up to reveal a small wooden box, its lid carved with a rose. Voila, Poirot said, lifting it triumphantly. He inserted the key, and the lock clicked open. Inside was a single item, a folded letter, its edges brittle. Poirot unfolded it, his eyes scanning the text. It was another page of Christie's manuscript, describing Margaret's final moments in the secret passage, betrayed by someone she trusted. Edward stared at the box, his face ashen. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know it was there. Poirot's voice was cold, but you knew enough to hide the manuscript, to protect your family's name. Tell me, monsieur, who else is involved? Who dug at Margaret's grave? Edward shook his head, his voice breaking. I don't know. I acted alone. Poirot studied him, unconvinced, but decided to press no further for now. He tucked the letter into his coat and left the room, the box under his arm. The manuscript was nearly complete, its pages painting a vivid picture of murder and deceit. But one question remained. Who was still guarding the Blackthorn legacy? Back at the inn, Poirot locked the box and letters in his suitcase, his mind turning to the stranger in the churchyard. Someone was searching for something, perhaps the box, perhaps another clue. He needed to protect Anne and ensure Edward faced justice, but first, he would summon the magistrate to secure the manor. As night fell, Poirot sat by his window, the village cloaked in fog. The case was nearing its end, but the final piece of the puzzle eluded him. He sipped his tisane, his little gray cells working tirelessly, determined to unravel the Blackthorn legacy once and for all. Chapter 9. The final clue. Hercule Poirot stood in the dimly lit village hall of St. Mary's Hollow, his polished shoes gleaming against the worn wooden floor. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that settles when a long-buried truth is about to be unearthed. Around him, the key figures of the case and Carver, Edward Blackthorn, and Dr. Victor Langley sat in a semicircle of mismatched chairs, their faces a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. The hall's high windows, let in slants of late afternoon light, casting elongated shadows that danced across the faded wallpaper. Poirot's mustache twitched slightly, a sign his little gray cells were in overdrive, piecing together the final threads of a mystery that had spanned decades. He adjusted his tie, a crisp white affair that stood in stark contrast to the somber mood, and began to pace slowly before his audience. "Ms. Amos," he said, his voice calm yet commanding, "we are gathered here to resolve a puzzle most intricate, one that has its roots in the tragic death of Mademoiselle Margaret Hale and the genius of Madame Agatha Christie. The manuscript, the locket, the ink stain, all these are but pieces of a grand tapestry, woven with care and cunning. Today, Hercule Poirot shall reveal the final clue." And Carver sat rigidly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her dark eyes followed Poirot's every move, a flicker of hope mingling with the weariness of her quest for justice. Edward Blackthorne, by contrast, slouched in his chair, his aristocratic features taut with unease. Dr. Langley, the retired physician, fidgeted with his spectacles, his weathered hands betraying a nervousness that belied his otherwise composed demeanor. The villagers, a small crowd gathered at the back of the hall, whispered among themselves, their murmurs a soft undercurrent to Poirot's deliberate pause. "Let us begin," Poirot continued, "with the manuscript, the heart of this affair. Madame Christie, a writer of unparalleled insight, did not merely craft stories, she observed the human condition. She saw truths that others overlooked, and in the case of Margaret Hale, she left behind a trail of clues, hidden in an unpublished work, to ensure justice would one day prevail. This manuscript, stolen from the library of Mademoiselle Finch, was no ordinary document. It was a map, a guide to a crime that was buried by power and privilege." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "The ink stain in the library, it was the first sign of carelessness. The thief, in their haste, left behind a trace of a rare ink, one sold only by Monsieur Percival Quill in London. This led Poirot to the stationery shop, where a torn train ticket pointed to St. Mary's Hollow. Here, in this village, the past and present collided. The locket, the manor, the coded page, all these were steps on a journey to the truth. But the final clue, Ms. Amos, lies in the secret passage of Blackthorn Manor, where Mademoiselle Hale met her end." Edward Blackthorne shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tightening. Poirot's sharp eyes caught the movement, but did not linger. Instead, he turned to Anne. "Mademoiselle Carver, you came to St. Mary's Hollow seeking justice for your great-aunt, Margaret Hale. You believed the manuscript held the key to her killer's identity, and you were correct, but you were not alone in your pursuit. Someone else sought to keep the truth hidden, to protect a legacy built on blood." Poirot reached into his pocket and produced the two manuscript pages he had recovered, one from the hidden compartment in Blackthorn Manor's library, the other from the safe in Edward's study. He held them aloft, their edges slightly yellowed but their text still legible. "These pages," he said, "are more than words. They are Madame Christie's confession, her way of ensuring Margaret's story would not be forgotten. The first page, found in the manor, spoke of a golden locket and a coded message. The second, from the safe, described a secret passage where Margaret was last seen. Together, they point to a single truth. Margaret Hale was murdered to protect a secret, and the Blackthorn family was at the heart of it." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Edward's face paled, but he said nothing. Poirot continued, his voice steady. "Let us reconstruct the night of the murder, shall we? Margaret Hale, a young heiress, was beloved in this village. She was kind, spirited, and wore a golden locket engraved with a rose, a gift from her late mother. But Margaret had discovered something dangerous, something that threatened the Blackthorn family's reputation. She wrote a letter, hidden in her locket, accusing Lord Reginald Blackthorn, Edward's grandfather, of a crime most heinous. This letter, found by Mademoiselle Carver, was the key to her murder." Poirot turned to Dr. Langley, who flinched under his gaze. "Monsieur Langley, you were Margaret's physician. You saw her on the night she died. You told Poirot you saw the locket, and you knew of the letter she hid inside it. But you did not speak of it then. Why? Because you were afraid." afraid of Lord Blackthorn's power, his influence. You kept silent, and Margaret's death was ruled an accident. Langley's hands trembled. I had no choice," he stammered. "Lord Blackthorn was a powerful man. He controlled everything in this village. If I had spoken out, my family would have suffered." Poirot nodded, not unkindly. "Fear is a powerful motivator, monsieur, but silence is a heavy burden. You carried it for decades, until Mademoiselle Carver's arrival stirred the past." He turned to Edward now, his tone sharpening. "Monsieur Blackthorn, your family's legacy is built on secrets. Your grandfather, Lord Reginald, was a man of ambition. He sought to expand his influence, to secure his wealth through any means necessary. Margaret Hale, with her accusations, posed a threat. She had uncovered evidence of his dealings, perhaps fraud, perhaps something darker. To silence her, he lured her to the secret passage in Blackthorn Manor, where she was killed. The locket, containing her letter, was taken, but it was not destroyed. It was kept, perhaps as a trophy, perhaps as insurance." Edward's eyes narrowed. "This is preposterous," he said, his voice low but firm. "You have no proof, Monsieur Poirot. These are stories, nothing more." Poirot smiled faintly, unperturbed. "Ah, but Poirot always has proof, monsieur. The blood in the secret passage, preserved in the dust, was tested by a colleague in London. It matches the records of Margaret Hawley's blood type, kept in the village archives. The manuscript pages, written in Madame Christie's hand, describe the passage in precise details only someone who knew the manor intimately could provide. And then there is the matter of the theft. You, Monsieur Blackthorn, stole the manuscript from the library. You used the rare ink, purchased by your agent, the veiled woman, to write the letter to Poirot, hoping to lure him into a wild chase, to distract from your family's guilt." Edward's composure faltered, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. "I only wanted to protect my family's name," he said, his voice breaking. "The manuscript, it was going to ruin us. My father told me stories, warned me that the truth must stay buried. I didn't know about the murder, not truly, but I knew the manuscript could destroy everything." Poirot's gaze softened. "But, only slightly, you acted out of loyalty, monsieur, but loyalty to a lie. Your father, not your grandfather, was the true architect of Margaret's death. Lord Reginald may have set the stage, but it was your father, Charles Blackthorn, who struck the fatal blow. The manuscript pages make this clear. Madame Christie, who visited St. Mary's Hollow in her youth, heard whispers of the crime. She wove them into her work, hiding the truth in plain sight, knowing that one day someone would follow her clues. And Carver stood, her voice trembling but resolute. "My great-aunt deserved better," she said. "She deserved justice. Monsieur Poirot, you've given her that." Poirot inclined his head. "Justice, mademoiselle, is the duty of Hercule Poirot. But it is Madame Christie who deserves our gratitude. Her mind, so brilliant, preserved the truth when all else failed." The villagers erupted into hushed conversations, their eyes darting between Poirot and Edward. Two constables, summoned earlier by Poirot, stepped forward. "Monsieur Edward Blackthorn," one said, "you are under arrest for the theft of the manuscript and for obstructing justice." Edward rose, his shoulders slumped, and allowed himself to be led away. The crowd parted, their whispers following him out the door. Dr. Langley bowed his head, tears glinting in his eyes, while unclutched the locket, now returned to her. As if it were a lifeline to her great-aunt's memory, Poirot addressed the room one final time. "The case of Margaret Hale is closed, Ms. Amos, but let us not forget the power of a single clue." Madame Christie understood this. She knew that truth, no matter how deeply buried, will always find its way to the light. Hercule Poirot merely followed her lead. As the villagers dispersed, Poirot lingered, his eyes tracing the patterns of light on the floor. He thought of Agatha Christie, her cunning mind, her ability to see beyond the surface. This case, he mused, was as much her triumph as his. The manuscript, now safe, would be a testament to her genius, a reminder that even in fiction, truth could prevail. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting St. Mary's Hollow into twilight. Poirot stepped outside, the cool air a balm after the intensity of the hall, and approached him, her expression softer now. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "I don't know how to thank you. You've given my family peace." Chapter 10. The case closed. Hercule Poirot sat in his immaculate London flat, the morning sun filtering through the heavy drapes, casting a warm glow on the polished mahogany table before him. His delicate porcelain cup, filled with his preferred tisane, steamed gently, the faint scent of chamomile mingling with the crisp air of the room. The case of the vanishing Agatha Christie manuscript had reached its denouement, and yet, as was his custom, Poirot found himself reflecting on the intricacies of the affair, his little gray cell still humming with the satisfaction of a puzzle well solved. The manuscript, now safely returned to the Rural Library in St. Mary's Hollow, had revealed not only a decades-old crime, but also the brilliance of Agatha Christie herself, a literary sleuth whose coded clues had outlived her. To bring justice to Margaret Hale, the flat was quiet, save for the soft ticking of the ormolu clock on the mantelpiece. Poirot's valet, George, had discreetly retreated after serving the tisane, leaving the detective to his thoughts. On the table lay the final pages of the manuscript, carefully arranged in their original order, their edges slightly yellowed, but their secrets now laid bare. Poirot's fingers, clad in their customary white gloves, traced the elegant handwriting of the title page, The Golden Locket. It was not one of Christie's published works, but rather a private endeavor, a story, woven with truths too dangerous to print in her lifetime. Poirot marveled at her audacity to hide a real murder within the guise of fiction, knowing that someday, someone with the right mind might uncover it. He leaned back in his chair, his mustache perfectly symmetrical, and allowed his thoughts to drift to the events of the past weeks. The cryptic letter that had arrived at his door, signed with an inked quill, had been the spark that set his investigation in motion. It had led him to Miss Eleanor Finch, the nervous librarian who had first alerted him to the manuscript's disappearance. The ink stain on the library's oak table had been his first clue, a careless mark that tied the thief to the letter's sender. From there, the trail had wound through London's West End, to the misty village of St. Mary's Hollow, and finally to Brighton, where the locket and its hidden letter had revealed the truth about Margaret Hawley's murder. Poirot sipped his tisane, savoring its warmth. The case had been a tapestry of deception, woven with threads of greed, fear, and familial loyalty. Lord Reginald Blackthorne, the powerful figure who had silenced Margaret's murder, was long dead, but his legacy had lingered in his grandson, Edward, whose desperation to protect the family name had driven him to steal the manuscript. Poirot had seen such motives before pride, that most human of flaws, could twist even the most honorable hearts. Yet, it was in Carver, Margaret's great-niece, who had given the case its emotional weight. Her determination to uncover the truth, to give voice to her ancestors' silent story, had touched even Poirot's disciplined heart. The detective's thoughts turned to the final confrontation in the village hall of St. Mary's Hollow. There, before Anne, Edward, and Dr. Langley, Poirot had laid out the solution with his characteristic precision. The manuscript, he had explained, was not merely a story but a cipher, its pages laced with subtle hints that pointed to Blackthorne Manor's secret passage and the bloodstains that marked Margaret's final moments. Edward's confession had been the culmination of Poirot's efforts, a moment of clarity that had brought justice to a crime nearly forgotten. The arrest had been swift, handled by the local constabulary, who had been both awed and slightly bemused by Poirot's theatrical summation. Now, as he sat in his flat, Poirot considered the manuscript's fate. Miss Finch had informed him, in a letter delivered just that morning, that the library intended to publish The Golden Locket as a tribute to Agatha Christie. The decision had been unanimous among the library's board, who saw it as a way to honor both the author and the truth she had sought to reveal. Poirot approved, though he wondered how the public would receive a story that blurred the line between fiction and reality. Would they see Christie's genius as he did, or would they merely enjoy the tale as another of her mysteries? He suspected the latter, but it mattered little. The truth was out, and Margaret Hawley's name had been cleared. A soft knock at the door interrupted his reverie. "Entrez," Poirot called, setting down his cup with care. George entered, holding a silver tray with a single envelope. "A letter for you, sir," he said, his tone as deferential as ever. Poirot took the envelope, noting its fine cream paper and the elegant handwriting that addressed it to Monsieur Hercule Poirot. He opened it with a letter knife, his movements precise, and unfolded the contents. It was from Miss Finch, written in her neat, slightly tremulous hand. She thanked him profusely for his role in recovering the manuscript and solving the mystery of Margaret Hale. The letter was warm, almost effusive, and Poirot allowed himself a small smile as he read her words of gratitude. She mentioned that the library had already begun preparations for the manuscript's publication, with a foreword to be written by a noted Christie scholar. Miss Finch also expressed her personal admiration for Poirot's methods, confessing that she had begun reading Christie's novels herself, inspired by the case. "I see now why you admire her so," she wrote. "Her stories are puzzles, but they are also about people, and you, Monsieur Poirot, understand both." Poirot folded the letter and placed it on the table, his mind drifting to Miss Finch's transformation. When he had first met her, she had been a bundle of nerves, her hands fluttering like startled birds as she spoke of the manuscript's theft. By the end of the case, she had found a quiet strength, her faith in justice restored. It was a small victory, but one that Poirot cherished. The solving of a crime was not merely about catching the guilty, it was about setting right the imbalances of the human spirit. He rose from his chair and crossed to the window, pulling back the drape to gaze at the bustling street below. London was alive with its usual energy, cabs rattling over cobblestones, pedestrians hurrying under umbrellas, the city's pulse steady despite the drizzle. Poirot's eyes, sharp as ever, caught the details: a woman adjusting her hat, a newsboy calling out headlines, a pigeon strutting along the pavement. Each was a piece of the great human puzzle, and Poirot, ever the observer, felt a quiet satisfaction in his place within it. His thoughts returned to Agatha Christie. She had been a master of observation, too, her stories filled with the small details that revealed character and motive. The manuscript had been her greatest puzzle, a challenge left for someone like Poirot to solve. He wondered if she had known, as she penned those coded pages, that they would one day bring a detective to her doorstep. Had she imagined him, Hercule Poirot, with his mustache and his little gray cells, piecing together her clues? The thought amused him, and he allowed himself a moment of whimsy, picturing Christie smiling from beyond, pleased that her plan had succeeded. The ormolu clock chimed, marking the hour, and Poirot returned to his chair. He picked up the manuscript pages once more, flipping through them with a gentle touch. Each page was a testament to Christie's craft, but also to her courage. She had known the risks of exposing a powerful family like the Blackthorns. Yet, she had written the truth, trusting that it would find its way to light. Poirot admired that trust, that faith in the persistence of justice. It was a quality he shared, though he would never admit to such sentimentality aloud. As he set the pages down, his gaze fell on a small stack of letters on the table, requests for his services, no doubt, from clients across England and beyond. One envelope, sealed with red wax, caught his eye. It bore a crest he did not recognize, and the handwriting was bold, almost impatient. A new case, perhaps, with its own mysteries and intrigues. Poirot's fingers twitched, tempted to open it, but he resisted. For now, he would allow himself a rare moment of rest. The case of the vanishing manuscript had been taxing, not in its danger, though the chandelier incident in Brighton had been unsettling, but in its demand on his intellect. He deserved, he decided, a day of quiet reflection. He sipped his tisane again, finding it had cooled but was still pleasant. The flat was warm, the fire in the grate casting a soft glow on the walls. Poirot's mind, however, was never truly at rest. Even now, it turned over the details of the case, seeking any loose threads he might have missed. There were none, he concluded with satisfaction. The ink stain, the train ticket, the locket, the manuscript pages all had been accounted for, each clue fitting neatly into the whole. It was, he thought, a case worthy of Agatha Christie herself. A memory surfaced, unbidden, of his visit to the Brighton pier, wherein Carver had handed him the locket. Her eyes had been fierce, filled with the fire of justice, but also with a quiet gratitude. She had thanked him, not just for solving the case, but for giving her family closure. Margaret Hawley's story, silenced for decades, had finally been told. Poirot had felt a pang of something pride, perhaps, or something softer when and had clasped his hand, her voice steady as she spoke of her great aunt's courage. It was a moment that lingered, a reminder that his work, though methodical, was deeply human. The clock chimed again, and Poirot realized he had been sitting for nearly an hour. He rose, smoothing his waistcoat, and crossed to his desk. There, he kept a small notebook where he recorded the details of each case, a private ritual. One he shared with no one. He opened it to a fresh page and began to write, his pen moving with the same precision as his thoughts. The Case of the Vanishing Manuscript, he titled it, followed by a brief summary: the letter, the library, the ink, the locket, the manner, the confession. He wrote of Carver's determination, of Edward Blackthorne's desperation, of Agatha Christie's genius. When he finished, he closed the notebook and placed it back in its drawer, satisfied that the case was truly closed. The day stretched before him, empty of obligations for once. Poirot considered a walk, perhaps to Regent's Park, where he could enjoy the crisp autumn air. But the thought of crowds, even orderly ones, was unappealing. Instead, he decided to remain in his flat, perhaps to read one of Christie's novels. He had a collection of her works on a shelf, their spines worn from careful reading. Murder on the Orient Express, perhaps, or The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. Both were favorites, their twists as delightful now as when he had first read them. As he reached for a book, the telephone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the quiet. Poirot hesitated, then answered, his voice as polished as ever. "Hercule Poirot, à votre service," he said. The caller was Chief Inspector Japp, his old friend from Scotland Yard, his voice brimming with urgency. A new case, it seemed, involving a missing diplomat and a series of cryptic telegrams. Japp's tone was pleading, but Poirot, with a rare firmness, declined. "Mon ami," he said. "Today, Poirot rests. Tomorrow, perhaps, we shall see." He hung up, a faint smile playing on his lips. The world, with its endless mysteries, could wait a little longer. For now, he would savor the triumph of the manuscript case, the satisfaction of a puzzle solved, and the quiet beauty of a London morning. He returned to his chair, picked up his tisane, and opened The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. As he read, the words of Agatha Christie filled his mind, a fitting tribute to a case that had begun with her genius and ended with his own. The hours passed, the sun climbing higher in the sky, and Poirot remained in his flat, lost in the world of fiction that had so recently intersected with reality. The manuscript was safe. Margaret Hawley's justice was served, and Hercule Poirot, for one rare moment, was at peace. The case was closed, but its echoes would linger, a reminder of the power of a single clue to rewrite history.